Chapter 757. Noah didn't tell anyone about his accidental encounter with Ilya and the fact that they had spent some time together. As if nothing had happened, Noah went straight back to Enosaka's house. He found that Saber hadn't come out of her room, and she had been guarding Yamamoto Sakura the whole time. So, he went to the room that Enosaka had designated as his room to take a nap. If he didn't sleep now, he might not have a chance to sleep at night. After all, master and servant were active at night. If there were no problems on Archer's side, then tonight, Rin Tasaka would probably call Noah and act together. In fact, it was indeed as Noah expected. After it got dark, Enbin, who didn't know when he came back, knocked on Noah's door, and didn't give Noah a chance to answer. "Come to the hall, Archer has found Castor's base." Upon hearing this, Noah, who had replenished his energy, slowly curled up the corners of his mouth. In the hall of Enbin's house, the warm light illuminated the surroundings. Sitting on the sofa, which was equivalent to the head of the house, Enbin first glanced at Noah, who was sitting on a chair opposite to him, and then looked at Saber, who was sitting in another seat in a dignified posture. "Why is Saber here?" Noah shrugged, indicating that he didn't know, which made Enbin roll his eyes. "Have you found Castor's base?" Under Enbin's gaze, Saber said with a calm face. "If you want to fight against Castor, then let me join you." For Saber's words, Noah smiled as if he had expected it. On the other hand, Rin Asaka continued to stare at Saber and spoke bluntly. "What's your purpose?" "As a servant, I only have one purpose from beginning to end." Saber replied firmly. "Destroy other servants and win this Holy Grail war. Is there anything wrong with that?" "No, there is nothing wrong with that." Enbin was not willing to be outdone. "But our servants are also in your range of elimination, right? This is the same for you, it's just a matter of order. Although we are in a cooperative relationship, in the end, we still need to determine the winner." Saber fearlessly looked at Enbin's eyes. "Sakura hasn't recovered her consciousness yet, which makes us very passive. Instead of being passive, it's better to follow your order." Rin Enosaka understood what he meant. "In other words, you also want to form a cooperative relationship with us. Now that Master can't act, I think this is the best policy." Saber glanced at Noah. "Moreover, although we are enemies, the degree of kindness will not be affected by whether we are enemies or not. As a knight, I have the obligation to repay your kindness." Saber was referring to the fact that Noah had taken her in without asking for anything in return. "So that's how it is. What a noble knight," Rin Enosaka said nonchalantly as he brushed his long hair aside. "Well, with the help of the strongest Saber, it's a good thing for us, what do you think?" The last sentence was directed at Noah. "I have no opinion." Noah was also indifferent. "Anyway, we can't fight now, so we might as well cooperate first and solve the other servants." Saber nodded in agreement. "Very wise judgment. Then it's decided." Rin Enosaka tapped on the table and called out. "Then, come out and explain, Archer." As soon as Enbin's words fell, Archer's figure appeared behind him. From the original spiritual state, he entered the physical state and entered the eyes of everyone present. Castor's current base is in Liudongji. As soon as he appeared, Archer gave such information with a unique and calm voice. This morning, Castor retreated to Liudongji, and then he didn't move. In order to confirm whether it was the witch's plot, I specially monitored the place for a day. Now, we can basically confirm that Liudongji is Castor's base. Liudongji. Noah and Enbin pondered at the same time. Liudongji. It was a temple in Fuyuki City, not a shrine. However, it was a very special place. Liudongji was a rare spiritual place in Fuyuki City. A witch actually hid in a temple? Noah curled his lips. It's really not flattering. Are you sure that Castor's base is in Liudongji? Saber also looked at Archer. Is it possible that Castor deliberately misled you? At first, I thought so too, but after careful investigation, I gave up on this suspicion. Archer closed his eyes. Castor has already set up a position in Liudongji, and the influence of that position has extended to the entire Fuyuki city. Now, all the residents of Fuyuki city have become Castor's magical storage, their vitality has been extracted and converted into magical power, and all of them are flowing to Liudongji. You. What did you say? Enbin's face finally changed. Castor is extracting the vitality of the residents of Fuyuki city. Even Noah and Saber had their eyes fixed on him, let alone Rin and Akka. It can't be wrong. Archer said in a deep voice. If the range of influence is so wide, every master and servant should be aware of it. If you go out and look carefully, you will find the flow of magical power. The audience was suddenly silent. Don't think that I will just stand by and watch, Castor's servant. Rin Enbin bit his lips and immediately said. Now that we have determined Castor's base, let's attack Liudongji tonight. Is that okay? As if he had already expected Enbin to say that, Archer asked as if he was ready. That place is Castor's base, Castor's ability will be more or less improved, plus the magical power of the entire Fuyuki city's residents will be used as a storage for the witch. Breaking in like this is like directly breaking into a trap, is that okay? If it's just us, maybe we will really think about it, but now there are two masters and servants here, I don't think Castor's little trick will work. Enbin looked at Noah. By the way, can your rider come over? Rider can come over at any time. Noah replied calmly. However, with this lineup, I don't think we need Rider to come out, let her continue her task, in case something happens, I will directly use the command seal to summon Rider. Enbin pondered for a moment and then nodded. Saber's heart slightly moved. Task. Don't worry about it, it's just a trivial matter. Noah spread his hands. Saber, since you plan to go with us, what are you going to do about Sakura? Is this Ling's magic workshop? Saber said without flinching. Then, Sakura should be safe here. Noah smiled non-committally. Safe. Of course, she was safe. With the scabbard's protection, nothing will happen to Sakura. Then it's decided. Enbin said decisively. Tonight, we will attack Liudongji and kill Castor. Saber and Archer nodded at the same time. Noah looked out of the window, and his eyes flashed. Indeed, it's time to withdraw. Chapter 758. The night gradually deepened. At the foot of a mountain, Noah, Rin, Saber, and Rin raised their heads and looked ahead. To be more precise, they were looking upwards. None of them spoke. They were all silent. In front of Noah and the rest, there was a stone staircase on the mountain that wasn't very tall. The stone staircase was very long, as if it extended directly into the sky. It made them feel small and insignificant. The long stone staircase would definitely make anyone who wanted to climb it feel slightly dispirited. If a normal person wanted to climb the stone staircase, it would take at least 30 minutes. Fortunately, at the end of the stone staircase, Noah and the rest found a mountain gate. Behind the mountain gate was a temple called Ludong Temple. However, whether it was Noah, Rin Enbin, or Saber, they were not looking at the mountain gate or the long stone staircase. Instead, they were looking at a barrier that could not be seen with the naked eye. It was a barrier that enveloped the entire mountain. That's a barrier, right? Noah looked in front of him and asked without turning his head. A barrier used to drive people away. Or a concealment barrier. What a pity. Rin and Osaka's expression became serious. Neither. That's a barrier used on servants. Saber gave the answer directly, but her expression was also very serious. Moreover, it doesn't look like it was set up by someone. It's a naturally formed barrier against spirits, right? A naturally formed barrier. Noah was surprised. There's such a barrier. There's nothing to be surprised about. You must have heard of it before. Rin and Osaka answered for Noah. Places like temples and shrines are filled with very dense spiritual energy. This kind of spiritual energy can repel all kinds of monsters and monsters. It's a sacred place where those monsters can't approach. This is a similar place. Saber continued Rin and Osaka's words and continued to explain to Noah. Servants are spirits. Although they aren't ghosts or spirits, they are similar existences. Therefore, other than entering through the mountain gate, servants shouldn't be able to enter Ludong Temple directly, right? Even servants can be affected. Noah continued to look at the high mountain gate. That's really surprising. This should be the only special place, right? Rin and Osaka said to Noah. I don't know if it's because some eminent monk once passed away here, or because Ludong Temple itself is an unusually spiritual place, or maybe someone deliberately set it up behind the scenes. All in all, the property of expelling spirits around this temple seems to have been strengthened to the limit. Except for this stone staircase, there's no way for servant to enter. In other words, as a servant, Saber has to barge in openly. There's no way to sneak in, right? Noah shrugged helplessly. Then, what should we do? Of course, we have to break in directly. Rin and Osaka clenched his fist. I must teach that arrogant caster a lesson. After saying this, Rin and Osaka directly stepped onto the stone staircase and walked towards the mountain gate. Seeing this, Noah and Saber looked at each other and followed. As for Archer, he didn't follow from the beginning. As an archer, Rin and Osaka sent Archer to occupy a commanding position in the surrounding area, ready to support at any time. However, Noah was more or less suspicious. Was there really a place higher than the mountain in front of him? Could it be that Rin and Osaka was habitually dropping the ball? With such doubts, the three of them climbed up the stone staircase and walked towards the mountain gate. However, when the three of them arrived at the mountain gate, Noah and Saber stopped at the same time. Noah stretched out his hand and directly pulled Rin and Osaka to his side. Saber, on the other hand, raised her invisible sword and pointed it in the direction of the mountain gate. Rin and Osaka, who was about to complain to Noah, saw it. In front of the mountain gate, there was a person. A man who was as tall as Archer, had a long dark blue ponytail, and was holding a 2-meter-long katana in his hand. He was wearing a light purple kimono and had a tree branch in the corner of his mouth. He was looking down at Noah and his team with an elegant smile. Servant. Rin and Osaka was surprised. Yes. That man was also a servant. Not caster. Noah was also surprised. There's a second servant in Ryodong Temple? Even Saber was caught off guard. She raised her sword and spoke in a solemn voice. Who are you? Hearing Saber's question, the elegant man's smile didn't fade, he just gently raised the katana in his hand and introduced himself. Assassin servant, Sasaki Kojiro. The introduction of the assassin servant stunned everyone, including Noah. That servant had even revealed his real name. Was he not afraid that someone would find his weakness and research his noble phantasm? And, Sasaki Kojiro. Although this name was not as famous as those heroes in myths and legends, it was a name that almost everyone in this country knew. That was because it came from a very famous swordsman from the Warring States period of this country. At that moment, Noah and Rin and Osaka's eyes flashed. Profession, assassin, pseudo, master. Real name, Sasaki Kojiro. Attribute, neutral, evil. Ability points, strength, C durability, E agility, A plus magic power, E luck, A noble phantasm, profession skills, aura concealment, D. Since he wasn't an official assassin class servant, even though this skill was classified as a class skill, it was a skill that the assassin himself possessed. As a martial artist, it wasn't a skill for sneaking and hiding. Instead, it was a skill that the assassin used to blend into his surroundings. It wasn't a skill that was honed for assassination. It wasn't as effective as the assassin's ability to conceal his presence. However, if he eliminated his presence, he would still be an opponent that even a servant would have a hard time detecting. Preservation skills, mind's eye, pseudo-8 belong to the so-called premonition, or sixth sense skills. It was different from mind's eye, true, which was based on prediction supported by experience. It was based on the ability to predict danger based on his natural talent. He could see through the opponent's weapon and fighting style in just a few confrontations. That pair of eyes, even among the servants, was second to none. Transparency, B+ generally, the ability called mirror still water, referred to the spiritual realm that had been reached after rigorous training. After learning this skill, one could always maintain a clear and calm heart. They could even be indifferent to any situation, even if it was their own death. In battle, they could even completely nullify the confusion and fear caused by the opponent, which was represented by magic that interfered with the mind. Zone his experience, Bevan. If the same move was repeated countless times against the same opponent, the accuracy of the hit would not decrease. In other words, this was an ability that had the effect of not being seen through by the enemy. No matter how many times the enemy wanted to retreat or challenge again, they would not be able to see through the moves that were supported by this skill. They would always be forced to fight the same battle as the first time they met. Swallow return, A+. It was a sword technique that simultaneously slashed apart the opponent's killing sword from 3 different directions. It was neither a precious artifact nor a phenomenon that borrowed magic. It was a sword that was slashed out from the real world, disregarding the concept of time and space, and completely slashed out with 2 swords at the same time. It was a superb technique that was truly capable of slashing out 3 swords at the same time in the same second and at the same moment. It was a multidimensional distortion phenomenon that surpassed the elements of speed, delicacy, and feints. Although there were limitations, it had also reached the high-level domain of part of the realm of magic. Chapter 759. When the ability value of assassin, who claimed to be Sasaki Kojiro, entered Noah's mind, even Noah couldn't help but be stunned on the spot. Rin Enbin probably couldn't see it, but Noah really saw it. In the part of assassin's profession, there was a special standard word, fake. Assassin, fake. What does this mean? Undoubtedly, he was assassin's servant. Why did he specifically add the word fake? On top of that, the part of assassin's class skill, which was the part where the aura was blocked, clearly stated that assassin wasn't a real assassin, which puzzled Noah even more. Coupled with the various information revealed by assassin's skills, Noah's doubts in his heart were even stronger. Let's not talk about the ability value for the time being. From the information revealed by the opponent's skills, it could be seen that the opponent was not so much an assassin, but a saber. Not only did he possess a high mental state, but he also possessed a deadly sword technique. If it were not for the fact that his ability value did not meet the excessive requirements of the saber class, Noah would definitely be more willing to believe that his opponent was a saber. After all, the assassin job class was a job class that specialized in stealth and assassination techniques. The elegant man in front of him was standing in front of everyone, holding a long weapon that was obviously not suitable for assassination at all. There was nothing that matched with assassin's profession. Also, the opponent's noble phantasm was the same as Archer's, which was also empty. There were too many doubts. Rin Enbin, who didn't have as much information as Noah, clicked his tongue and held a gem in his hand. So that's how it is, knowing that there is no way to resist us with your own strength. Castor cooperated with your master, right? Work together with my master. Assassin closed her eyes and smiled without denying it. No, you're wrong. Originally, I don't have a master to speak of. As soon as this sentence came out, before everyone could react, a somewhat flirtatious laughter echoed. He's right, little girl, if assassin has a master, then I am his master. Accompanied by such a sentence, a black shadow suddenly appeared behind assassin. She lifted her black robe, revealing only the part of her face below her eyes, and laughed out loud. If you want to say why, it's because I'm the one who summoned him. Castor. Rin Enbin's beautiful face suddenly tightened, her hand holding the gem was getting tighter and tighter, and she even prepared to throw it. Rin and Osaka really had a lot of hostility towards Castor. However, it wasn't because of the hostility and excitement in her heart, but because of the message in Castor's words. Are you the one who summoned assassin? Noah looked straight at Castor. What do you mean by that? That's what it means, Rider's master. Castor's purplish-red lips made a sound of laughter. This Holy Grail War was originally a game where the master, as a magician, summoned the servant and fought with each other. So, why can't I, as a magician, summon the servant and become the master? Servant summoned servant. Saber, who was holding her sword, had a grimace on her cute face. Did you violate the rules of the Holy Grail War? The so-called Holy Grail War was actually a ritual. The ritual required the 7 chosen masters to summon their servants, and then they would fight until there was only one servant left, then the ritual would be declared over. There was no doubt that Castor violated the rules of the Holy Grail War by summoning a servant and taking away the position of a master. It was precisely because of this that the assassin summoned by Castor was not the real assassin. Instead, it was Sasaki Kojiro who did not meet the requirements of the assassin class at all. Noah finally understood the meaning of the word fake. I didn't expect that in order to win, you would not hesitate to go to this extent. You mercilessly absorbed the vitality of the entire Fuyuki city's residents as magical power, which violated the rules. I have to say, I underestimated your unscrupulous means. Unscrupulous means. Violated the rules. Noah's words directly made Castor laugh. Don't joke around, a rider's master is just a boring ritual established by a group of modern magicians. Although this level of ritual is a bit cumbersome, in my opinion, there are too many loopholes. If it weren't for the prize, I wouldn't mind directly dissolving the whole ritual. You want to use me as a pawn in the ritual, it's already very unpleasant. Hearing this, Noah finally recalled what had happened. The Castor in front of him was from the mythological era, and he mastered the magic of the mythological era. His magic attainments have surpassed the existence of magicians. In the eyes of a magician of the god generation whose magic attainments could be said to be terrifying, the ritual established by the 3 magician families called the Holy Grail War was indeed not a big deal, right? It's the magician's privilege to exploit the loopholes of the ritual itself and seize the results for himself. Castor sneered again and again. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame the magicians who established this ritual for not having the ability to master it. After that, Castor waved his hand as if he was tired of continuing the conversation. So, the time for a pleasant chat is almost over, everyone, let me wash away the shame during the day. Rin and Osaka and Saber immediately took a fighting stance. Only Noah still looked calm, looking straight at Castor. What? Don't you want to let your master fight again? Hearing that, Castor sneered on his face. That's not necessary. However, just as these words fell, a low voice that could be said to be emotionless, not even the slightest fluctuation, resounded from within the mountain gate. This time, your judgment is wrong, Castor. Castor was shocked when he heard the voice, he turned his head and looked inside the mountain gate. At the same time, Noah and the others also looked inside the mountain gate. He saw a tall and thin man in a suit, who was about 30 or 40 years old, leaning against the pillar of the mountain gate at some point in time. He looked down with emotionless eyes. You. Rin and Osaka was shocked. Gumu-sensei. Sensei. Noah raised his eyebrows. He's a teacher in your school. Master. Castor also spoke, and there was a little bit of panic in his expression. How can you come to this place? I know you're here for my safety. Gumu walked slowly, his voice was full of indifference. But, Castor, this time the enemy is only you and Assassin, two people can't deal with it. Castor was speechless. A barbarian like me should come out and fight, it's not suitable for me to stay in the back. Gumu said indifferently. So, Castor, start to deal with the enemy now. Hearing that, Castor's face changed a few times, and finally, he took a deep breath. I understand, Soichiro Gumu. The atmosphere at the scene suddenly became very tense. This atmosphere told Noah. Tonight, he would not stop as he had done before. Chapter 760. Who dash? The whistling mountain wind directly swept through the entire mountain path, causing the robes of the two groups of people standing in front of the mountain gate at the middle and top of the stone steps to flutter loudly in the wind. Looking up at Gumu, Soichiro, Castor, and Assassin standing in front of the mountain gate, Noah couldn't help but ask Rin Enbin on the side. Enbin, are you okay? Noah asked this sentence inexplicably. However, Rin Enosaka understood him. Don't worry about me. Rin Enbin's voice didn't have the slightest trace of reluctance, he seemed to have recovered his calmness. Although Gumu Soichiro is a teacher in our school, my relationship with him is not as good as you think. You don't need to worry about me, the problem is that the number of servants we have to deal with has changed from 1 to 2. From 1 to 2. Castor, who clearly heard Rin Enbin's words, suddenly snickered. You're wrong again, little girl, you don't have to deal with 2 servants, but 3. 3. Noah, Rin Enbin, and Saber's heart skipped a beat. That's right, 3. Castor's smile was getting more and more creepy as if he was trying to make people feel uneasy. A servant suddenly came to me and said that his master wanted a little girl, but the lineup on your side was a little bit against the rules, so he came to me and wanted to cooperate with me. Speaking of this, Castor's voice became a little bit malicious. So, now let's guess, where did that servant go? This time, Castor's words really brought uneasiness to Rin Enbin. Even Saber couldn't help but bite her lips, her face finally emerged a thorny expression. Only Noah, after hearing Castor's words, almost immediately launched his sensing ability. In the range of Noah's sensing ability, except for the people present, there were almost no other servants. However, Noah didn't think that Castor was talking nonsense. In other words, the servant who cooperated with Castor was not near Ludong Temple. Undoubtedly, they had cooperated, but the person was not here. This fact allowed Noah to come to a conclusion. That servant was obviously not used to deal with the people here. Thinking of this, Noah immediately thought of another possibility. He was shocked and grabbed Rin Enbin. Summon Archer. Quick! When Rin Enbin heard Noah's words, he was also stunned. Then, he inferred a possibility from Noah's words, and his expression changed. Without any hesitation, Rin Enbin raised his hand with the command seal over his head. Come here quickly. Archer. The command seal engraved on the back of Rin Enbin's hand immediately glowed red. Clank. Red light flashed, and it didn't take long for the command seal on the back of Rin Enbin's hand to turn it into a huge amount of magic power that rippled through the entire space. Buzz! Suddenly, the space around Rin Enbin suddenly distorted, as if something was spat out, and a red body was squeezed out. The person who came was naturally Archer, who was summoned by Rin Enbin. Pucci. However, as soon as he appeared, Archer spat out a mouthful of blood and knelt on the ground, clutching his chest. His tanned face became extremely pale, and he was violently gasping for breath. Taking a closer look, Archer's body was covered in scorch marks, and one of his hands was bleeding like a crack. He was in a sorry state. Archer. Rin, Anbin and Saber were shocked at the same time, and even Noah's face slightly sank. Sure enough, the opponent's purpose was to first destroy Archer, who could provide support from a distance. Otherwise, with Archer's support, the situation would be very unfavorable for caster and assassin. Fortunately, Rin Anbin summoned Archer. Otherwise, Archer would be likely to directly retreat from the opponent's attack. Did you find out so quickly? Seeing that Archer was seriously injured, but he didn't need to retreat, caster snorted. Sure enough, it's not good to give too many hints, I should reflect on myself. Ignoring caster's regretful words, Noah still looked at the sky. Because of the unexpected result, his face became calmer and calmer. Lancer is the one who cooperated with you, right? Among the 7 servants, only Saber, caster, and assassin were present. Ryder was performing Noah's task, so it was impossible for him to attack Archer. And Archer himself naturally wouldn't beat himself up like this. So, only Berserker and Lancer could cooperate with caster. From Noah's point of view, Ilya wouldn't be interested in cooperating with caster at all. With the almost immortal Berserker as a servant, Ilya didn't need to cooperate with anyone. So, only Lancer was left. Very smart, Ryder's master, but even if you know, it's useless, this is the result of being my enemy. Caster raised his hand that was wearing a black glove. Finally, I'll ask you one more time, Ryder's master, do you want to cooperate with me? Hearing this, Noah smiled, but there was no trace of a smile in his eyes. I'm sorry, I don't even have the slightest idea of cooperating with the unscrupulous witch. Caster's face suddenly froze, and his face immediately became distorted. You called me a witch, right? What? Do you hate people calling you a witch? But what you've done has only made people more convinced that you're a witch. Noah said as if he was repeating a fact. Your anger is not worth a single cent. Caster raised his head fiercely, and his body surged with violent magic. Since that's the case, I'll vent all my anger at being worthless in your eyes on you. Go. Assassin. Hearing Caster's angry voice, Assassin smiled and slowly rubbed her feet on the ground. She lifted the long sword in her hand, and her whole body suddenly tensed up as if she was ready to attack. Bang! With the sound of a clear footstep, Assassin's figure turned into a vague shadow, and in a flash, she appeared in front of Noah's group. Clang! A sword suddenly appeared in front of Noah's group, like an arc-shaped half-moon, and cut toward Noah's neck like lightning. The strong wind contained in the sword directly tore the air, and a fallen leaf was neatly divided into 2 halves in an instant. Clang! However, at this moment, another sword light suddenly appeared in the space like a golden flash. It slashed across and directly collided with the long saber that was slashing at Noah's neck. Clang! Amidst the loud and clear sound of metal clashing, a wave of berserk strength chi shook out from the space where the 2 sword lights clashed. Immediately, it transformed into a tangible strength chi that surged out in all directions. Bang! As if they were shocked by the shockwave, the 2 figures with the sword light were knocked back at the same time by the explosion of the chi. Oh! Assassin, who was knocked back to the mountain gate above, raised her eyebrows. Saber. Saber held the invisible sword, and her eyes were like lightning, looking at Assassin above. Let me be your opponent. Be careful, Saber. Noah, who was standing behind Saber, said. Your opponent's ability value may not be comparable to yours, but their agility may be better than yours, and they don't use brute force. I am afraid that their sword skills are better than yours. Saber nodded her head heavily. Chapter 761. Clang! With the heavy sound of steel clashing against steel, the real battle began. The invisible sword that couldn't be seen with the naked eye collided with the katana that was obviously too long. Sparks burst out on the uneven stone stairs. Archer. Noah stepped forward and said to Archer, who was half kneeling on the ground. His body was covered in black charred marks and fresh blood. "Let's go. Let's go," Noah said to Archer, who was half kneeling on the ground. "Are you okay? No matter how you look at it, I don't look like I can do it, right?" Archer's weak but stubborn voice entered Noah's ears. "But, at least, you don't need to worry about me here, whether it's my master or myself, as long as we don't die, there's no problem, Archer." Rin Anbin gritted his teeth, but he also knew that it was better not to be pretentious in this situation, so he could only obediently stay behind Archer. Hearing the movement from behind, Noah, who could imagine what kind of situation was behind him, smiled, raised his head, and looked at Castor in front of the mountain gate. "Then, let's end this quickly." After that, Noah rushed out like a cheetah, suddenly turned into a black shadow and rushed toward Castor's direction. Facing Castor, "You actually dare to rush toward me, you're really stupid." Castor sneered, raised his black-gloved hand, and pointed in the direction of Noah. Buzz! A magic circle with the shape of an eyeball suddenly rotated around Castor, and an amazing amount of magical power was gathered inside it. In the next moment, a dazzling beam of light shot out from the magic circle, piercing through the space, like a laser beam, violently rushing toward Noah's direction. Looking at the dazzling beam of light, Noah's eyes flashed, but he didn't dodge at all. Castor was full of ridicule, as if he was looking at a fool. He directly collided with the beam of light. Bang! 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 A heavy muffled sound was heard one after another. However, it was not the sound of the beam of light falling on Noah's body, but the sound of the beam of light directly hitting Noah's body, making the beam of light hit a solid wall, and suddenly burst open. What? Castor's face greatly changed. As a magician with Kanzaki's magic, his magic was actually ineffective against an ordinary human, which made Castor suffer a great impact. Whoosh! Noah took advantage of this gap. His figure suddenly rushed forward like lightning, and in a flash, he arrived in front of Castor, whose face changed greatly. Whoosh! With a whistling wind, his fist like a cannonball, directly hit Castor's abdomen. Whoosh! However, almost at the same time, another fist that carried the same whistling sound of the wind shot over like a bullet and collided with Noah's fist. Bang! Accompanied by a muffled sound, the two fists collided with each other. One of them was shaken in the direction of the mountain gate, and the other one was shaken back to the stone stairs and fell back to the middle position. After stabilizing his body, Noah, who fell back to the middle position of the stone stairs, slowly raised his head and looked up. He saw that in front of Castor, a man was standing in front of Castor, looking at Noah blankly with his two fists in front of his body, one above the other, and the other below the other, with a ferocious posture, like a python that was about to bite its prey, was standing in front of Castor, looking at Noah blankly. Just now, the person who disintegrated Noah's punch was the man in front of him. Gumu Soichiro, Castor's master. This man had actually managed to block Noah's punch. Even if he didn't use enhanced magic, Noah's punch couldn't be blocked by an ordinary person. But the man in front of him did block Noah's punch. You seem to be surprised. Gumu Soichiro lowered his fist and looked straight at Noah without any emotion. I heard from Castor that you seem to be the same type of master as me. Since you can rely on enhanced magic to fight with a servant, why can't I? When Gumu Soichiro said that, Noah noticed it. On Gumu Soichiro's fist, a magical halo was fluctuating. Although it was not the same as Noah's, it was definitely the effect of the enhanced magic. This man, like Noah, strengthened his body and used his own fighting skills to fight. However, there was no trace of his own magic on Gumu Soichiro's body. The magic around Gumu Soichiro's two fists was completely the aura of Castor's magic. In other words, Gumu Soichiro's magic was Castor's magic. If Noah's fighting skills were his own, Then Gumu Soichiro's fighting skills were his own, but the magic was Caster's. Although it's just a punch, I can still see from that punch that you seem to be someone who also knows how to hone your own fighting skills. Gumu Soichiro said such a sentence in an almost ruthless tone. This is the first time I have met the same type of person, but I have honed my fighting skills for more than 20 years. How many years have you honed your fighting skills? Are you trying to say that my combat skills are weaker than yours because I've been training for a shorter period of time than you? Noah narrowed his eyes and suddenly smiled. Then let's give it a try. After that, on Noah's fist, the magic lines representing enhanced magic spread like electric wires, and quickly wrapped Noah's fist in it. Boom! The soles of his feet slammed on the ground, stirring up a muffled sound. Noah's figure once again turned into a black shadow. With a whistling wind, he rushed straight toward Gumu Soichiro. The oncoming wind made Gumu Soichiro have a little reaction. However, Gumu Soichiro did not choose to dodge. His tall and thin body was like an iron tower standing in the same place. Until the whistling wind approached him, he finally made a move. Raising a pair of fists, he once again assumed the posture of a python with its jaws wide open, ready to pounce on its prey. Suddenly, a rich magical power curled around Gumu Soichiro's fists, as if he was wearing a pair of invisible steel gloves. He slowly clenched his fists. Hoo! The two fists that were also enhanced, with a harsh sound of wind, almost at the same time, bombarded out. Noah's fist was like a bomb that contained a terrifying power. It blasted out directly. Gumu Soichiro's fist, on the other hand, flashed back and forth like a rear-end missile that could freely change its trajectory. It was also like a python that was twisting its soft body. It drew an unpredictable trajectory in space and bit in Noah's direction. And just like Gumu Soichiro could see the level of Noah's fighting skills with just one punch, Noah also clearly felt it in that punch. When that punch blasted out, the unpredictable trajectory had already blocked all his retreat routes, and the surrounding space was all shrouded in the attack range. Even if Noah changed his direction, the punch would definitely be like a venomous snake that would chase after him and bite him. This Gumu Soichiro's fist technique could not be described as unfathomable, but could only be described as strange. Noah, who understood this, curled up the corners of his mouth. His body tensed up, and he spun around. His entire arm was like a whip, swinging forward with a whistling sound. All of a sudden, the fist that was originally like a powerful cannonball turned into a whip carrying an iron ball. It suddenly struck out and collided with Gumu Soichiro's fist. Boom! Suddenly, a wave of energy rippled out from the center of their fists, causing the surrounding atmosphere to be shaken until it was on the verge of collapse. Chapter 762. Bang! The muffled sound was like a direct hit to a person's heart, abrupt and loud. The force transmitted from the fist caused Gumu Zangikiro to take 2 steps back. On the other hand, Noah's body only trembled a few times, and then he stabilized. This fact also made Gumu Zangikiro's eyes condensed. Although Gumu Zangikiro's fist technique honed for a much longer time than Noah, but the emphasis is on the word strange, it's a fist technique based on strangeness. Of course, a fist technique based on strangeness, once seen through, there's no trace of threat. Just one move. Just one move, Noah saw through Gumu Zangikiro's fist technique, and Gumu Zangikiro couldn't help but become dignified. Gumu Zangikiro didn't know that Noah has a talent called the ability of perception. Even if the time to hone fighting skills is not as long as Gumu Zangikiro, but with the ability of perception, Gumu Zangikiro's fist technique has no secret in front of Noah. In addition to the collision just now, Noah has more or less understood Gumu Zangikiro's strength. In the aspect of strength, although the magician of Kanzai used magical power to strengthen, Gumu Zangikiro's physical ability is still not as good as Noah's, who has been strengthened by the virus of protozoa and used the magic enhancement. In the aspect of skill, Gomu Zangikiro's fist technique is indeed strange, but it's only strange in one aspect. If used in a surprise attack, perhaps even the unaware saber will suffer a big loss, but for Noah, who has the ability of perception, there's no threat. Purely in the aspect of skill, Noah doesn't have much of an advantage. After all, the opponent's fist technique was honed for more than 20 years. Noah excluding the sword technique, in the aspect of barehanded fighting, at most 2 or 3 years. However, even if there's no advantage, Noah's fighting skills are not much worse than Gomu Zangikiro's. As long as Noah was given some time to get used to it, Noah would be able to break that set of fist techniques in minutes. Understanding this point, Noah did not choose to be passive. Instead, he took the initiative to dodge and once again rushed forward. However, this time, Noah gave up on a head-on clash. Whing! Along with the sound of mana vibrating, streak-like mana patterns also spread across Noah's feet, causing Noah's speed to soar instantly. Zonichiro Sama. Caster stretched out his hand, and a burst of magic surged in his hand. Whing! Suddenly, the soles of Gomu Soichiro's feet were also surrounded by a halo of magic. At that moment, Gomu Soichiro also took advantage of his own soaring foot strength. His figure was like a ghost, constantly flashing around Noah's body. His fists brought a burst of wind, pulling up a fist shadow, like a fierce viper, falling in the direction of Noah like a storm. Noah did not have much of a reaction to Gomu Zangikiro's almost continuous attacks. He was like a leaf that moved back and forth under the attack of a wild wind. He faced the fist wind and dodged if he could. If he could not dodge, he would throw out a punch. His punch accurately landed on Gomu Zangikiro's fist. Occasionally, he would throw out a heavy punch. The increasingly heavy force on it caused Gomu Zangikiro to have no choice but to withdraw. While Noah and Gomu Soichiro were engaged in a battle of skills, on the other side, the two swordsmen were engaged in a white-hot sword battle. Clang 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 clang. That was the constant collision of the golden sword and the silver sword, stirring up a sound of steel clashing. On the golden side was Saber, who was wielding an invisible sword and attacking ferociously like a stormy sea. On the silver side was Assassin, who held an extremely long weapon in her hand. She moved as if she was dancing. She swung her long sword gracefully, yet she was able to perfectly parry the storm of sword strikes every time. Both of them were absolute heroes of the sword. However, the two people's swords were not the same. If Saber's swordsmanship had the effect of training the body, then Assassin's swordsmanship had the effect of training one's spirit and state of mind. Her swordsmanship did not emphasize on physical strength, but it had strict requirements on technique. Under such circumstances, this battle was like a collision of strength and softness. Every time Saber's invisible sword slashed at Assassin, Assassin could easily dodge it. Then, the long sword in her hand swung in a perfect arc, bringing with it a sharp force, slashing in Saber's direction. Every time Assassin's dancing long sword slashed in a difficult path toward Saber, Saber's intuition skill would sense it, and she would move the invisible sword in her hand, blocking Assassin's seemingly soft sword. In short, neither of them could do anything to the other. Undoubtedly, in terms of ability value, Saber was much higher than Assassin, but she could not do anything to Assassin. In terms of technique, Assassin was much better than Saber, but because Saber's ability value was too high, she could not make an effective attack. One wanted to crush the opponent with strength. The other wanted to defeat the opponent with skill. In the end, neither of them could do anything to the other. Of course, in terms of ability value, Saber had an overwhelming advantage. Even if it was a battle of attrition, the one to fall would definitely be Assassin, whose stamina and magic power were not as good as Saber's. The problem was that Assassin also had an advantage. That was, Assassin had taken advantage of the terrain advantage of high ground. One was at the top of the stairs. The other was at the bottom of the stairs. Assassin, who was standing at the top of the stairs, did not move at all. She only needed to wave the long sword in her hand, and with her superb sword skills and the extraordinary length of the long sword, she could easily block Saber's slashes. Saber, who was standing at the bottom of the stairs, wanted to rush up countless times, but she was constantly attacked by the moonlight like slashes from above. Under the continuous sparks, she could not even take a step forward. When a sword attacked from a high place, whether it was dodging or defending, it was more exhausting than when it was on flat ground. Moreover, Assassin, who occupied the high ground, only needed to defend that position, and Saber would definitely not be able to rush up. Even if she did, it would be a waste of energy. Both servants had their own advantages. As a result, this tug-of-war situation where they couldn't win after a long time appeared. Under such circumstances, Saber couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Undoubtedly, she had the absolute advantage in terms of ability value, but she could not defeat her opponent. It was no wonder that Saber was anxious. Just like what Noah said, this person's sword skills are better than mine. No, it's way better than mine. Using superior skills and the terrain to make up for the lack of strength. Assassin was the embodiment of this point. Of course, if that was the case, Saber would still have a way to deal with it. What she was afraid of was that this servant with low ability value had hidden some decisive noble phantasm. This was the scariest thing about every servant. Just as Saber was having such thoughts, Assassin's elegant voice was heard from above. You don't have to be so cautious of me. I don't have any decisive noble phantasm. Or rather, I don't even have one. Assassin's sudden words made Saber stand up in shock. This man had actually revealed his trump card. Unlike heroes like you who enjoy fame, I'm just a nobody. I don't have any powerful weapon. The only thing I can rely on is this sword in my hand. Assassin looked down at Saber with a smile on her face. The only thing I can show you is this sword skill that I've spent my entire life training. After saying that, Assassin abruptly turned her body to the side and pulled the long sword in her hand behind her back to block the attack. At that moment, Saber felt it. It was as heavy as the shadow of death. Chapter 763. Saber could only watch as Assassin suddenly turned her body sideways. She pulled the long sword behind her back and held it up. Saber's warning bells rang in her head. Saber, who had a skill called intuition, was able to sense it clearly. At this moment, as Assassin assumed her stance, a demonic aura surged from her body. It was a deadly threat called death. Saber's intuition told her that if she continued to let Assassin do as she pleased without doing anything, she would definitely end up in a miserable state. Saber pointed her invisible sword at Assassin as if it was a conditioned reflex. Her body was like a ferocious beast as she suddenly charged forward. Unfortunately, Saber's actions were in vain. Although it wasn't a very long time, it was more than enough for Assassin. Secret sword, with a soft murmur, Assassin suddenly opened her eyes. Her gaze was as sharp as a blade as it shot towards Saber's direction. Swallow return. When the name of the famous demonic sword was released from Assassin's mouth, the word death was directly reflected in Saber's eyes. Clang! Along with the sound of the swords, 3 crescent-like blade lights suddenly flashed out from the space, as if they had penetrated the space directly. They were like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, flying from the distant hell towards Saber's direction. Although there were only 3 sword lights, the 3 sword lights instantly enveloped the space around Saber, blocking all of Saber's escape routes. With the deadly shadow of death, they approached her. At this moment, Saber's intuition was like a crazy cicada, constantly chirping. The skill called Swallow Return was absolutely undodgeable. If she tried to dodge it, she would only be reduced to the fate of being cut in half. Before this knowledge was transmitted to Saber's mind, Saber's nerves, driven by her intuition, reacted in advance. Almost instinctively, Saber's body surged with violent magical power. Bang! A gust of wind suddenly erupted from Saber's invisible sword. Wind King Barrier, invisible air. As if it had reached the highest stage of accumulation, it was fiercely compressed together, as if it had reached a critical point. The storm was like a violent impact, surging out from Saber's invisible sword. The strong storm with a sharp whistling sound, with the sword in Saber's hand as the center, fiercely vibrated, and met the three sword lights that were approaching like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. Dong! A loud sound was heard. It was the sound of the three crescent-like sword lights colliding with the storm. As if the three crescent moons had collided with the shock wave, a violent wave of wind violently swept in all directions. Crack! The stone steps on the ground cracked open from the impact. Paw! The trees that were closer to the explosion were shattered cleanly. The three sword lights ruthlessly cut the storm apart, and then, their momentum became slower and slower. In the end, they were directly covered by the storm, and disappeared from the space. Seeing this, Assassin's face finally changed. She stomped her feet and quickly retreated, creating a distance between them. However, her eyes were fixed on the center of the storm. Phew, there, Saber, who was in the middle of the storm, heaved a heavy sigh, raised her head, and looked into Assassin's eyes. What a terrifying swordsmanship. If I hadn't released my relic, I would have been defeated. Although you don't have a relic, you have a swordsmanship that can reach the level of a relic. You're indeed a famous swordsman. Hearing Saber's generous praise, Assassin still did not speak. This was because Assassin's gaze was completely taken away by the bright object. It was the sword in Saber's hand. She did not know when, but a sword appeared in Saber's hand. It was shining with a bright golden light. The body of the sword was as beautiful as mithril, and the blade was made of gold. The hilt was blue, and the tip was inlaid with a gem. It was a very dazzling knight's sword. Assassin was certain. In this world, there was definitely no other sword that was as dazzling as the one in front of her. Holy sword. Assassin's voice was more or less hoarse. I see. You have such a dazzling holy sword. Saber, your real name, since it has come to this, there's no point in hiding it anymore. Saber seemed to have predicted this situation. She raised the dazzling holy sword in her hand and pointed it at Assassin. My name is Artoria Pendragon. I am the Queen of Great Britain. King Arthur. As if to praise the name that was enough to shake the heavens and the earth, the entire world suddenly became silent, and there was not a trace of movement. Wind enchantment, invisible air. That was one of Saber's noble artifacts. Its body was wind, and it used compressed wind to wrap around the sword. It changed the refractive index of light and wrapped around Saber's sword, causing the sword to be hidden. It was a noble artifact that could not be seen with the naked eye. There were three functions of this noble artifact. 1. It could make it difficult for the enemy to distinguish the size and trajectory of the sword. 2. When necessary, it could release the compressed wind into an extremely explosive force. 3. It was used to hide Saber's true noble artifact. It was because Saber's noble artifact, the golden holy sword, was too famous. It was because he had obtained the holy sword that the world-renowned Night King was able to win 12 major battles in a short span of 10 years, becoming the King of Britain who was known by everyone. The lake sprite was its former owner. Avalon, which had the name of Fairyland, was its scabbard. The king's sword was its other name. It was also known as the lake sword. The lake sprite gave King Arthur the holy sword. Excalibur. In this world, there was no other holy sword more famous than it. That's why you need to hide this sword. Once the sword is exposed, you won't be able to hide your real name anymore, am I right? Assassin straightened her back as if she was mocking him, but also as if she was smiling bitterly. It seems that being too famous is not a good thing, Night King. Saying such a sentence, Assassin's face once again showed an elegant and leisurely smile. However, there's nothing more delightful than having a showdown with the legendary strongest holy sword. After saying that, Assassin turned her body again, pulled the long sword behind her back, and looked at Saber with a burning gaze. Then, use that holy sword of yours to receive my secret sword and defeat me. Saber silently reached out her other hand, holding the sword with both hands, and fearlessly faced Assassin. As you wish. On the stone stairs, the knight holding the golden holy sword and the swordsman holding the silver sword looked at each other. In the next moment, the two rushed at each other at the same time. A golden sword light and three crescent-like sword light collided with each other. Poochie! Accompanied by a tearing sound, a large amount of red blood suddenly splashed into the air. As for the two people standing at the top and bottom of the stone steps, they had already missed each other. Saber, who stood at the top of the stone stairs, still held the holy sword in her hand, and lowered her head in silence. Assassin, who stood at the bottom of the stone stairs, maintained her posture of wielding her sword, and also lowered her head in silence. Taking a closer look, in front of Assassin, there was a huge wound that split diagonally from her shoulder to the ground. Ha! Assassin, who lowered her head, squeezed out a laugh. You win, King Arthur. Leaving this sentence, the figure of Assassin, whose real name was Sasaki Kojiro, gradually became illusory. Finally, she disappeared on the spot. Assassin, out. Chapter 764. You win, King Arthur. When this sentence echoed in the air and entered Saber's ears, Saber felt it. Behind her, the scent of Assassin disappeared little by little until it completely disappeared. Opening her eyes and staring at the holy sword in her hand, Saber whispered softly as if she was talking to the swordsman who was no longer there. As a servant with low ability and no noble phantasm, you can use your sword technique to release my wind barrier, invisible air, and use the holy sword. You should be proud, Sasaki Kojiro. The main function of Saber's wind barrier, invisible air, was to hide the Excalibur so that her real name and noble phantasm would not be exposed. Therefore, even though the invisible wind barrier had the effect of concealing weapons, and if used well, the effect would be amazing. However, in order to maintain the effect of this noble phantasm, Saber's mana was constantly being depleted, and she was unable to fully utilize it. Once the wind barrier, invisible air, was released, Saber, who did not need to maintain the wind barrier, invisible air, was able to use all of her magical power and all of her power to display her true strength. Therefore, although it was just a simple matter of turning the holy sword from invisible to tangible, it meant that Saber had used all of her strength. If a numerical value must be used to compare, in the case of maintaining the wind barrier, invisible air, Saber's strength was probably around 80% or 90% of her peak. Only by releasing the wind barrier, invisible air, and taking out her holy sword, Saber could concentrate all of her magical power to maintain the wind barrier, invisible air, and display her full strength. A servant with low ability and no noble phantasm could force Saber to this extent. It was indeed something to be proud of. Pang! Just when the winner was decided between Saber and Assassin, from the other side of the stone steps, a heavy muffled sound echoed in the air. Whoosh! Following the heavy muffled sound, a figure flew out like an arrow leaving a bow, carrying a sharp sound as it broke through the air and heavily smashed into the pillar of the mountain gate. Poochie! Then, a mouthful of blood spurted out from that person's mouth. His body was like a puppet with a broken string, and slowly fell down. It was only then that Saber reacted. She quickly raised her head and looked in the direction of the mountain gate. Soichiro-sama. Castor let out a sorrowful cry, and looked at the figure below the mountain gate with extreme resentment. He said in a hysterical voice. You! How dare you! The one who had heavily smashed into the pillar of the mountain gate was, shockingly, Gomu Zangakiro. At the foot of the mountain gate, Noah turned his body sideways and looked straight at Gumu Soichiro, who had hit the pillar, and said with a calm face. "See? You can't win just because you've trained for a long time, right?" To be honest, Kugi Soichiro-sama's fist technique was quite exquisite. It's just that the fist technique was too focused on the word strange. Although the moves were very subtle and strange, if it was used for a surprise attack, as long as the opponent was slightly careless, it was possible to kill the opponent, even if the opponent was stronger than Kugi Soichiro. But because of this, if the opponent saw through the fist technique or was vigilant in advance, then the fist technique without the effect of strange would be of little use. At least, for Noah, who had extraordinary sensing ability and exquisite fighting skills, it was true. Therefore, after seeing through Kugi Soichiro's fist technique, Kugi Soichiro could no longer fight with Noah, and was directly defeated by Noah. After all, in any case, even if he didn't use the power, Noah could compete with the highest level of servant. There were strong and weak servants. Kugi Soichiro, who was strengthened by Castor's magic, could indeed compete with the servant. However, with Kugi Soichiro's strength, there was no way to compete with the highest level of servant, such as Berserker. So, the result was doomed. It was impossible for Kugi Soichiro not to understand this point. Therefore, Castor's support became the most important. Unfortunately, magic has no effect on me, Castor can only be reduced to a spectator. Noah glanced at Castor and said such a sentence with a smile. "And, do you think I don't know that you have been waiting for me to use the magic cannon?" Castor. Castor's face changed in an instant. A divine magician who doesn't even care about a large-scale ritual like the Holy Grail War, you must have a countermeasure against my magic cannon, right? Noah sneered. Although the power of that magic has been greatly improved because of my magical power, after all, its predecessor is still the magic bullet. For magic, it's impossible that you don't have a way to deal with it. If it weren't for my magic enhancement, I'm afraid that you would even have a countermeasure against it, right? I have to say, your brain is really good. Not only did you prepare the card assassin, but you also pulled Lancer to your side. Even Kugi Soichiro, the master who can compete with the servant, is on your side. Noah sighed. However, you are not the only smart person in this world. You are smart, it's not a problem. The problem is that you don't treat others as fools. If you can think of it, others can also think of it. If you have a hidden card, others will naturally have it too. You didn't see that I have the ability to make magic ineffective, this is your biggest mistake. After that, Noah looked at Castor. Checkmate, Castor. This sentence made Castor completely excited. No. I have prepared so much. I will never lose here. After that, Castor raised one of his hands above his head. Buzz. Suddenly, the entire mountain where Ludong Temple was located began to tremble, and a huge amount of magical power was poured into Castor's body. With the turbulent flow of magical power pouring into Castor's body, Castor's magical power became more and more violent. That magical power was all absorbed from the residents of Fuyuki City, right? I don't believe that even if it's a magic that can burn Ludong Temple, you can't completely nullify it. In that sharp voice, a staff suddenly appeared in Castor's hand. Whoosh! However, just when Castor was about to use the magic that could burn Ludong Temple, an arrow with flame-like magical power flashed through the space, like a meteor, piercing the sky, and shot toward Castor. Poochie! The meteor-like arrow directly penetrated Castor's body and came out from the back of Castor's heart. Castor's expression, movements, and the huge amount of magical power in his body were all stagnant. Turning his head stiffly, Castor looked at the direction where the arrow came from. There, Archer was kneeling on the ground with blood on his mouth, holding a bow in his hand, his face was pale, and he sneered. "This is a gift for you, which, Archer, who was almost killed by Lancer because of Castor's calculation, got his revenge at this most critical moment. Archer. In a very unwilling cry, Castor's body gradually dissipated, and finally, he followed Assassin's path. Looking at Castor's figure gradually disappeared, Gumu Soichiro, who was leaning against the pillar of the mountain gate, closed his eyes. Castor, exit. Chapter 765. Ho! The mountain wind once again blew past the stone stairs in front of the mountain gate. It was as if the tense atmosphere in the air had been swept away as it slowly blew past. After Castor and Assassin left the arena, Kumoi Soichiro leaned against the pillar of the mountain gate and closed his eyes. Noah, Rin Enbin, Saber, and Archer didn't know what to say for a while, so they stayed in the same place and fell into silence. Tonight's battle could be regarded as the real cruel and ferocious side of the Holy Grail War. The probing battle like before no longer existed, and it was replaced by a real battle. Tonight, the two servants took the lead to withdraw, announcing the victory of Noah's team. However, in the face of a victory that was achieved through killing, almost none of the four present could feel a sense of accomplishment and joy of victory. Noah and Rin Enbin looked at each other, then they looked at the mountain gate above at the same time. To be more precise, it should be said that they looked at Gumu Soichiro, who was leaning on the stone pillar of the mountain gate, as if he was already dead. Then, Noah spoke. I don't have a hobby of killing people. Don't make it sound like I like to kill people. Rin Enbin, who was about to say something, was silenced by Noah's words. After glaring at Noah, he sighed and looked at Gumu Soichiro and said, Don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. You have already lost, Gumu-sensei. If you don't want to be killed by other masters, you should quickly escape to the church and seek refuge. In such a case, generally, it was impossible to leave a master alive. After all, even if the servant has withdrawn, as long as the master is not dead and still has the command seal, then they will not lose the qualification to continue to participate in the Holy Grail War. If they are lucky, or have the ability, the master who still has the command seal can sign a contract with another servant and continue to participate in the Holy Grail War. In order to prevent such a thing from happening, during the Holy Grail War, the master will be obliterated. Gumu Soichiro seemed to be clear about this point. He opened his eyes, as indifferent as before, as if he didn't care about his life at all, and said expressionlessly, Are you not going to kill me? I'm sorry, I don't have a hobby of killing people. Rin Enbin turned his head away. So, before I change my mind, you should quickly escape to the church. As soon as this sentence fell, a sneer echoed in the forest. Unfortunately, there is no way for this person to survive even if he escapes to the church, so the loser should obey the rules and directly leave here. Such a voice came from afar, drilling into the ears of everyone present. Everyone present was shocked, they all turned their heads, and looked at the source of the voice. Of course, Noah. Because Noah didn't feel that someone was coming. Of course, it wasn't because the other party hid from Noah's sensing ability. It was because the other party wasn't even within Noah's sensing range, he just let his voice pass. Then, Noah and the rest saw it. In the direction of the voice, a luxurious-looking spear suddenly shot out, like a bullet, directly landing on Gumu Soichiro's body. Puchi! The sound of a body being pierced through resounded in the sky above Ludong Temple. Gumu Soichiro, whose chest was pierced, spat out a muffled groan, his eyes wide open, but his expression remained the same, there was no change at all. Immediately, Gumu Soichiro maintained this appearance, and gradually lost his vitality. Gumu Soichiro, dead. The sudden change shocked Noah and the rest. Who? Saber yelled, stomped on the ground, and rushed out like a gust of wind, chasing the source of the voice and the spear. Rin and Osaka wanted to chase after her, but Noah pulled her back. Ever since they came to Ludong Temple, Rin and Osaka had been pulled by Noah. Moreover, every time she was pulled, it meant that something bad was about to happen. This made Rin and Osaka a little anxious. What's wrong now? Hearing this, Noah didn't say anything, he only smiled bitterly, turned his head, and looked at Archer, who was still half kneeling on the ground. Meeting Noah's gaze, Archer, who was clutching his chest, smiled bitterly. I really can't hide from you. Archer's words made Rin and Osaka have a bad feeling. What's wrong? Hearing Rin and Osaka's words, Noah and Archer didn't answer. Under such circumstances, Archer suddenly said this sentence. Do you know where I came from? Noah and Rin and Osaka were both stunned. However, there was a reason why Archer said this. Oh right, you still don't know, right? Archer looked at Noah and said helplessly. Actually, Rin didn't know my identity, including my real name. This time, Noah was really surprised, he looked at Rin and Osaka. It was fine if others didn't know. As Archer's master, how could Rin and Osaka not know Archer's real name? Could it be that Rin and Osaka was so bad that she forgot to ask for the servant's real name? It's not my fault. Rin and Osaka quickly said. During the summoning process, Archer's memory seemed to be in a mess, he couldn't even remember who he was, that's why I didn't know. Well, I guess that's what happened. Archer smiled helplessly. Now, let me tell you where I came from. You. Rin and Osaka was shocked. You've recovered your memory. Don't expect too much. I'm not a famous hero, and I'm not a character that appears in legends. Perhaps, in this world, no one knows my name. Archer closed his eyes. If you want to know why, it's because I'm a heroic spirit from the future. Noah and Rin and Osaka frowned at the same time. A heroic spirit from the future. This was not something to be surprised about. Heroic spirits were spirits that had left the world and existed outside of it. They were not bound by the time and space of the world itself. Therefore, the heroic spirit throne that existed outside of the world had gathered heroes from the past, present, and even the future. Therefore, it was not strange that Archer was a heroic spirit from the future. Yes, there's nothing strange about a heroic spirit from the future. You're just wondering why I'm telling you this, right? Archer seemed to have seen through Noah and Rin Enben's thoughts as he spoke calmly. Now that things have come to this, there's nothing to hide. Regardless of what happened to me after I became a heroic spirit, before I became a heroic spirit, I was already living in this era. Noah and Rin and Osaka looked at each other in dismay when they heard this. Noah's frown deepened as he asked with uncertainty. In other words, before you became a heroic spirit, you were still a human. Now, you're in this world. That's strange, isn't it? Archer said self-deprecatingly. But you're only half right. Half? Noah was confused. What do you mean? Before I became a heroic spirit, I was still a human living in this era, Archer said in a deep voice. But, I'm not in this world. After hearing Archer's words, Noah's heart skipped a beat. Even Rin and Osaka seemed to have thought of something and blurted it out. Parallel world. Correct. Archer's expression was complicated. Otherwise, there's no way to explain why I don't exist in this world. Noah and Rin and Osaka understood Archer's words. In other words, Archer was from this era when he was alive. However, in this world, in this era, Archer did not exist when he was alive. In that case, the only explanation left was the parallel world. Chapter 766. The so-called parallel worlds actually referred to worlds that were similar but had some differences in certain aspects. Just like two sides of a mirror, parallel worlds were like mirrors that looked at each other. They were on different parallel lines and would only look at each other, but would not interact with each other. The difference was that if you looked at a normal mirror, the inside and outside of the mirror would be the same. Parallel worlds, however, would have differences in certain aspects. For example, Archer was one such example. Undoubtedly, he existed in this era when he was alive, but there was no Archer in this era when he was alive. This meant that Archer did not exist in this era when he was alive. Instead, he existed in this era of another parallel world. After a long period of time, he achieved greatness and became a heroic spirit. It's basically confirmed that I don't exist in this world. At least, I didn't find myself in this world. Archer's voice was complicated, but also relieved. Perhaps this is a good thing. A good thing? Rin and Osaka asked. Why? Why would there be a reason? Archer said sarcastically. No matter who it is, they would be dissatisfied with their past. Unfortunately, no matter which world it is, there is no such thing as a regret medicine. As for me, my dissatisfaction is so great that I feel like it's a good thing that I don't exist anymore. Noah went silent. Let's not talk about whether Archer was right or wrong. Noah felt that no matter which world it was, there were plenty of people with unbearable pasts. The Archer servant in front of him was obviously one of them. Rin and Osaka stared at Archer as if she was trying to see through his heart. She bit her lips. Why are you suddenly saying this? Why? Archer's expression revealed a hint of helplessness. I just feel like if I don't say it now, I won't have the chance to say it in the future. The bad premonition in Rin Enbin's heart suddenly grew stronger, causing her to bite her lips harder and harder. Archer sighed and finally let go of his hand that was covering his chest. When Archer removed his hand from his chest and let Noah and Rin Enbin see his chest, Noah and Rin Enbin reacted differently. Noah seemed to have expected this and closed his eyes. Rin and Osaka's eyes widened as he fell silent. On Archer's chest, where his heart was, there was a hole. A large amount of blood seeped out and dyed Archer's clothes red. As you can see. Archer forced a smile. When I was ambushed by Lancer, my heart was taken away by that deadly magic gun right from the start. It's already not bad that I'm able to hold on until now. The ominous premonition came true. Rin Enbin gritted his teeth, his expression filled with unwillingness. He had no choice but to accept this. Archer's heart had been pierced through. If he wasn't a spirit and had been holding on, he would have died a long time ago. Archer's departure meant that Rin Enbin had lost her master status. Of course, Rin Enbin still had the command curse. If she could find another servant to contract with, she could continue to participate in the Holy Grail War as a master. However, losing the servant that he had summoned was already a loss for Rin Osaka. For a girl like her who saw victory as her mission, it was hard to accept this fact. Rin Enbin didn't feel as sad about Archer's disappearance. After all, the disappearance of the servant didn't mean that they were gone. Originally, the servants in the Holy Grail War were just the avatars of the heroic spirits in the outer world. Archer's disappearance meant that he had returned to the seat of heroic spirits. He didn't really die. I'm sorry, Archer, Rin Enbin smiled weakly. If I didn't ask you to provide long-range support and asked you to come with us, you wouldn't have been attacked by Lancer, and you wouldn't have had to leave now. I'm always like this. I always make mistakes at the most crucial moments. If you want to resent me, resent me. You think too much, Rin. I don't have any reason to resent you. Archer shook his head. I don't want to fulfill my wish, so I don't care much about the Holy Grail. I only fought because you wanted to. I don't resent anyone. However, I hope that you will remember what I'm about to say. Archer's expression suddenly became serious. You need to be careful. The Holy Grail might not be a good thing. Archer's sudden words shocked Noah and Rin Enbin. What did he mean by that? As I said before, I was also a person of this era, Archer said word by word under Noah and Rin Enben's surprised expression. Actually, in my life, I participated in the Holy Grail War as a master, and I almost won the Holy Grail. Noah and Rin Enben looked at each other. Once obtained the Holy Grail? Noah asked in return. In other words, in the end, you didn't get the Holy Grail. It's not that I didn't get it, but I gave up. Archer didn't keep them in suspense anymore. Do you know the principle behind this ritual called the Holy Grail War? Noah and Rin Enben nodded at the same time. As everyone knew, there was a spiritual vein under Fuyuki City. The so-called spiritual vein, in fact, could also be called the Earth vein. It was connected to the source of infinite magic, and there was an extremely large amount of magic flowing through the terrain. This was the case in Mayo City. This was also the case in Fuyuki City. The Holy Grail War that existed in Fuyuki City was based on this foundation. The three magicians, Enben, Jiantong, and Einsteinberg, built a large-scale magic array on the land of Fuyuki City. This large-scale magic array had the ability to draw magic from Fuyuki City's earth vein and store it. With the magic power stored in this large-scale magic circle as the source, about every 60 years, the magic power in the veins of Fuyuki City would accumulate enough to support the launch of the Holy Grail War, which would be the beginning of the Holy Grail War. Most of the magic needed to summon the servant was provided by this magic array. Therefore, this large-scale magic array was also called the Great Holy Grail. Selecting a candidate for the master, bestowing the stigmata upon the master, and making contact with the seed of heroic spirits outside the world, allowing the master to effortlessly summon heroic spirits, which should have been incomparably difficult. These were all the functions of the Great Holy Grail. In addition to the Great Holy Grail, there was also a small Holy Grail. That was the real Holy Grail. This small Holy Grail was said to be made by the Einsteinberg family. Because of the knowledge instilled by Gaia and Alea, Noah remembered that the little Holy Grail was a vessel responsible for collecting the souls of the 6 servants who died in the Holy Grail War. When they returned to the outside of the world, they used their power to pierce a hole in the world. Then, they used the huge amount of magic accumulated in the Great Holy Grail to fix the hole, thereby creating a door to the outside of the world. It was a vessel to reach the root. This was the true face of the Holy Grail War. Under this purpose, the function of fulfilling any wish was just incidental. Therefore, before the souls of the 6 servants were stored in the small Holy Grail, this Holy Grail made by Einsteinberg did not have the power to fulfill wishes and open the path to the root. As if falling into a bad memory, Archer's face became ugly. Although I don't know if the same thing happened in this world, I still have to say that the Holy Grail is likely to have been contaminated. Chapter 767. Contamination. For a moment, Noah and Rin and Osaka almost didn't react to Archer's words. Especially Rin and Osaka, who was completely stunned. Noah still had some knowledge about the Holy Grail War from Gaia and Alea, so he knew the true nature and purpose of the Holy Grail War. Rin and Osaka, on the other hand, didn't know anything about the Holy Grail War. Every 60 years, the Great Holy Grail in Fuyuki City would accumulate enough magic power to start the ritual. Until now, the Holy Grail War had been held for more than 5 times. That was to say, this Holy Grail War was the 5th Holy Grail War. Before this, the previous 4 Holy Grail Wars had all failed due to all kinds of problems. In the end, no one obtained the Holy Grail. Among them, the 4th Holy Grail War happened 10 years ago. Originally, after the Holy Grail War ceremony, if one wanted to perform another ceremony, they would have to wait for about 60 years to accumulate mana. However, because the 4th Holy Grail War did not reach the point where the magic accumulated in the Great Holy Grail could be completely used up, it only took 10 years for the Holy Grail War to accumulate enough magic power to start the Holy Grail War ahead of time. Just 10 years ago, the previous head of the Enosaka family, Rin Enosaka's father, participated in the Holy Grail War. In the end, he died in a hurry, so Rin Enosaka didn't have a proper understanding of the Holy Grail War. Rin Enosaka only knew the basics of the Holy Grail War from the church's overseer. Rin Osaka thought that the principle behind the Holy Grail War that Archer mentioned was that the 7 masters and the 7 servants had to decide a winner before the Holy Grail would descend. Rin Enosaka didn't know that the so-called Holy Grail was already prepared by the barons. The only thing that was lacking was the power and ability to activate the Holy Grail, which was the souls of the 6 servants. Only after the souls of the 6 servants were filled, the Holy Grail would be truly formed. Rin Enosaka didn't know any of this. Seeing Rin Enosaka's confused look, Archer wanted to explain, but his body was suddenly filled with mist, making his body gradually become illusory. Archer! Rin Enosaka exclaimed. It seems that we don't have much time for a clear explanation. Archer clenched his teeth as he clutched his pierced heart and looked at Noah. Let's not talk about Ling for now. You seem to have some understanding of the true workings of the Holy Grail War, so I'll just say it directly. Just like the word said, the Holy Grail may have been contaminated. At least, that was the case in the Holy Grail War that I participated in when I was alive. Why? Noah did not waste any time and asked directly. Why was the Holy Grail contaminated? That happened during the Third Holy Grail War. Archer tried his best to explain what he knew in the most concise way. In the Holy Grail War, the House of Bayron, who was not good at combat magic, used a foreign classic as a catalyst to summon an 8th servant, Avenger, which was different from the 7 classes of the Holy Grail War. The 8th rank servant. Noah frowned deeply. Avenger. Avenger. Rin Enosaka subconsciously clenched his hands because of this ominous rank. There is no doubt that it is an ominous rank. Archer smiled helplessly. That servant is not a hero, but the absolute evil of this world, the sum of all the evil in the world, the most ancient evil, and so on. Instead of saying that it is a heroic spirit, it is better to say that it is a body of consciousness formed by the concept itself. If Gaia is the consciousness of the planet, and Alea is the consciousness of mankind, then it is the consciousness of all the evil in this world. The same as the suppression. Rin Enosaka was completely stunned. Even Noah's face sank. He was secretly shocked. There was such a thing in the Holy Grail War. Why didn't Gaia and Alea mention it at all? Don't be so surprised. They just exist in the same form. The combination of all the evil in the world is a kind of curse. Although ordinary curses are not on the same level as it, they can't really be compared to the 2 great restraints. Archer laughed. If that world's evil can really be on par with the restraining power, let alone a Holy Grail, whose authenticity is unknown, even if all the Holy Grail, including the real one, were added together, it would still be impossible to summon the existence of the restraining power. Hearing this, Noah and Rin Enosaka both sighed in relief. If there really was an existence on the same level as the suppression force, then let alone Rin Enosaka, even Noah wouldn't dare to say that he could deal with it at full power. Curse, pollution. Noah, who had calmed down, suddenly thought of something. Could it be? Did you notice it? Archer looked at Noah and bitterly smiled. That's right. Although he was known as the evil of this world, he was not a hero, nor did he leave behind any great achievements in any myths or legends. Naturally, he did not have the strength that a heroic spirit should have. He was very weak and was killed not long after he was summoned. There was no need for Archer to explain the subsequent development. Noah could guess it. The soul of the defeated Avenger was absorbed by the Holy Grail. Because even the soul itself was absolutely evil, the Holy Grail was contaminated and became an existence that manifested the evil power. Understanding this, Noah took a deep breath. What will the polluted Holy Grail become? Archer looked at Noah and said word by word, "You're the one who's going to die." It will become a vessel full of curses. Once it is summoned, a curse that no human can withstand will flow out and curse every human until the curse covers the entire world. Although Rin Enosaka didn't understand the theory behind it, she still understood what Archer was trying to say. She took a deep breath. Even Noah could not help but be speechless. He did not expect that participating in a ritual that Gaia and Alea called entertainment would involve the life and death of all humans. Although I don't know if this world is the same, the Holy Grail War that I participated in was such an existence. Therefore, I gave up on the Holy Grail. Saying this, Archer's voice started to fade away. At this time, Noah and Rin Enosaka realized. Archer's body had almost disappeared. Archer. Rin Enosaka opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she chose to stop and closed her eyes. After a while, she opened her eyes with a gorgeous smile on her face. It doesn't matter if the Holy Grail is contaminated or not. What I have done will not change. I participated in this ceremony for the sake of victory. So, Archer, even if you leave here, I will not obediently admit defeat. I will take your share and obtain victory. Is that so? Archer suddenly smiled. His smile was very gentle. Then you are really reliable. Leaving behind these words, Archer's increasingly illusory body finally began to slowly dissipate. In the end, he completely disappeared from the spot. Archer, leave. Rin Enosaka stared at the spot where her servant disappeared. She did not speak for a long time. Noah turned around and looked at Ludong Temple behind the mountain gate above the stone stairs. He then raised his head and looked at the sky. Rin Enosaka might not have heard it. But Noah did hear it. When Archer returned to the seat of heroes, a sentence entered Noah's ears. If you want to find Lancer, then go to the church. This was the last sentence that Archer left behind. At that moment, Noah's eyes flashed with a thoughtful light. The church, ah. Chapter 768. Bang! As soon as he returned home, Rin Enosaka seemed to have completely lost his strength. He fell on the sofa, and even his head was buried in the sofa. It was as if he could no longer move. Only a weak breathing sound could be heard. Noah, who came back with Rin Enosaka, glanced at Rin Enosaka but didn't say anything. Although he wasn't as good as Rin Enosaka, after tonight's battle, Noah also needed to think more about the future situation. After all, in just one night, 2 masters and 3 servants had already withdrawn from the Holy Grail War. Although Rin Enosaka didn't announce his withdrawal, he couldn't fight anymore after losing his servant. Unless he signed a contract with another servant, he could only be a spectator until the end of the Holy Grail War. Furthermore, because he still had the command seal, in order to prevent Rin Enosaka from returning, there might be other masters who would come to assassinate Rin Enosaka and kill the heir of the Enosaka family. That might happen. Therefore, compared to Noah, Rin Enosaka must have more worries. As for Noah, he needed to carefully consider the 2 pieces of information left by Archer before he left. One was that the Holy Grail was likely to be contaminated. The other was the whereabouts of Lancer, who killed Archer. Excluding Rin Enosaka, there were a total of 4 groups of masters and servants. The masters that left were Gumu Soichiro and Castor. The servants that left were Archer, Castor, and Assassin. The remaining servants, in addition to Saber and Rider, were Lancer and Berserker. Berserker's master was determined to be Ilya, and Saber's master was Tamahira. Therefore, in the entire Holy Grail War, only Lancer's master hadn't appeared yet. In addition, there was also the person who killed Gumu Soichiro. Just who was that guy? This was also a problem. What are you going to do? Noah said as if nothing had happened. You're no longer a master, there's no need for you to participate in the war. For your own safety, it's better to seek refuge in the church. Don't even think about it. Rin Enosaka finally reacted. He lifted his head from the sofa and met Noah's gaze with a strong will. I've said it before. Even if Archer leaves, I won't admit defeat. Is that so? Noah smirked. In other words, you're going to find another servant who's alone to contract. Me too. Rin Enosaka finally had a bitter expression on his face. However, among the remaining servants, the berserker is someone that cannot be negotiated with. It is impossible for him to choose to betray Iliasphère and sign a contract with me. Lancer is also the main culprit behind the destruction of Archer. Furthermore, his master has yet to appear, so I don't know if Lancer and his master are compatible. There is too little information, so he is basically not a contract target. Originally, signing a contract with Saber would be ideal. I lack a servant, and her master is unconscious and unable to fight. If we want to win, then the best choice is to sign a contract with her. Rin Enosaka sighed. However, I don't think that a knight like Saber would abandon her master and sign a contract with someone else. It's no different from betrayal, so Saber would definitely not do it. Rin Enosaka glanced at Noah. Or, do you want me to target your rider? I have no objections. Noah shrugged. As long as you can do it. After hearing Noah's words, Rin Enosaka stared at him and did not say anything else. Being stared at by Rin Enosaka like this, Noah raised an eyebrow. You should be a smart person, so don't ask me why I didn't kill you to prevent another master from coming back. If you do, I'll probably have to reevaluate you. In the face of Gomu Soichiro, who had lost his ability to resist, Noah said that he didn't have any hobby of killing people. If Rin Enosaka asked this question again, then Noah would have to reevaluate Rin Enosaka's intelligence. Then, I'll change the question. Rin Enosaka said calmly without any emotion. Is our partnership still going to continue? It was no wonder that Rin Enosaka would ask such a question. After all, cooperation was based on the fact that both sides had their own value. Now that Rin Enosaka had lost his servant, he had no way to compete with other masters. Under such circumstances, Rin Enosaka naturally lost the value of continuing to cooperate with him. In response, Noah asked back. Our partnership was originally to deal with Berserker. You were responsible for stalling for time, and I was responsible for using the time you bought to kill Berserker. Now that you don't have a servant, if you go up against Berserker, will you run away because of this? How is that possible? Rin Enosaka answered without hesitation. Didn't I say that even without Archer, I won't admit defeat? Then isn't it fine? Noah said in an indifferent tone. The division of labor between us hasn't changed. If we need to deal with Berserker, you'll still be in charge. As long as you can buy time, everything else has nothing to do with me. Rin Enosaka went silent. After a long time, Sui-kun raised her head, and a beautiful smile slowly appeared on the face of the popular idol of Sui-kun Academy. You're really gentle, Noah frowned and protested. Why did you come to such a conclusion? Rin Enosaka ignored Noah's words. With a mischievous smile, he buried his head back into the sofa. He no longer looked as powerless as he did before. At this time, a shadow flew in from the window and landed on the floor of Rin Enosaka's living room with a loud clang. Rin Enosaka quickly raised his head again. When he saw who it was, his spirit was lifted. Saber. It was Saber, who went to chase after the mysterious person who killed Gomu Soichiro. How was it? Noah stepped forward and looked at Saber. Did you catch up? Saber glanced at Noah and Rin Enbin. After a while, she shook her head. Not only did I not catch up, I didn't even see what the person looked like. I'm very sorry. Even Saber didn't catch up. Rin and Osaka was shocked. Does that mean that person is a servant? I'm not sure. Saber met Noah and Rin and Osaka's gaze. But I can feel a very strange magic. It doesn't seem like a human's magic. Doesn't seem like a human's magic. Rin and Osaka rubbed his chin. Since it's Saber's feeling, it shouldn't be wrong. The person used a gun to kill Jimmy-sensei. Could it be a lancer? No. Noah denied Rin and Osaka's guess. Lancer's gun is a red magic gun. That gun is obviously too luxurious. It's definitely not Lancer's gun. Rin and Osaka and Saber looked at each other. If it wasn't Lancer, then who could it be? Berserker. Impossible. That guy had gone berserk. He didn't know how to speak or retreat. He only knew how to charge and didn't use a gun. It couldn't be him. If it wasn't Lancer, then who could it be? When Rin and Osaka and Saber fell into silence, Noah came to the window and looked at the night sky. He recalled Archer's last words. Thus, Noah suddenly spoke. And Osaka, what kind of place is the church in Fuyuki? Chapter 769. The Church. Noah's words startled Rin Enbin, and he couldn't help but ask curiously. Why are you asking about this? I'm a little concerned. Noah waved his hand perfunctorily. Also, as a master, I have never been to the church and have only seen the supervisor of this year's Holy Grail War. I don't know much about the church, but you seem to know a lot about it. So, tell me more. Undoubtedly, you didn't go the last time I asked you to, and now you're bringing this up again. How suspicious. Rin Enbin stared at Noah for a while before continuing. If you want to ask about the supervisor of this year's Holy Grail War, although it wasn't my intention, I do know a lot about him. After all, he's my guardian. Guardian? Noah was surprised. The supervisor of the church is your guardian? I know it's strange, but the relationship between them is also very complicated. Rin Enbin said in a somewhat emotionless tone. That fake priest is indeed the supervisor of the Holy Grail War, but he's also related to the association that we magicians belong to. Rin Enbin paused for a while as if he was organizing his memories. After a while, he explained to Noah. The current supervisor of the church used to be a member of the Holy Church. Later, he was sent to the Magic Association and became my father's disciple. My father was in charge of teaching him magic knowledge and abilities. After my father passed away, he replaced my father and became my guardian because I couldn't be independent at that time. There's such a relationship. Noah scratched his cheek. In other words, other than the supervisor of the Holy Church, he's also a member of the Magic Association, and he's also your senior's guardian. That's why I said he's a fake priest. Rin Enbin obviously didn't have a good impression of his senior. Even his tone became a little harsh. Undoubtedly, the relationship between the Holy Church and the Magic Association is so bad, but that person was able to gain a foothold in both organizations and even became my father's disciple. However, thanks to this, after my father passed away, my magic was basically taught by him. In this aspect, I'll admit his value. Is that so? Noah nodded thoughtfully. What's the priest's name? Yen Feng Chili. Rin and Osaka said the name directly. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and clapped his hands. That's right, that fake priest also participated in the last Holy Grail War as master. This sentence made Noah's heart skip a beat. The church's supervisor, that priest Yen Feng Chili, also participated in the Holy Grail War. That means he was already a master. At this moment, Noah finally remembered. On the second night after summoning Ryder, he seemed to have met Lancer outside the church, right? The more he thought about it, the more Noah felt that something was wrong. The more he thought about it, the more Noah was worried. In addition to the information left behind by Archer before he disappeared, Noah couldn't sit still anymore and immediately walked towards the door. Noah. Rin Anbin froze for a moment. Where are you going? Saber, who had been quietly listening to the conversation like a loyal guard, also asked in surprise. There are some things I care about. Noah didn't even turn his head and directly walked out of the hall. I'm going to the church. You guys can rest first, don't wait for me. After saying this, Noah's figure disappeared from Rin Anbin and Saber's sight. Aren't you going to follow him? Saber asked Rin Anbin. Maybe Noah found something. Even so, I don't have a servant anymore. Even if I follow him, I'll just be a burden. Rin Anbin stared blankly at the door and then turned to look at Saber. To prevent this from happening again, Saber, I need your help. Saber understood the meaning behind Rin Anbin's words. You want me to form a contract with you and become your servant? Saber looked directly at Rin Anbin. Rin, you should know that my master is still unconscious. Do you want me to give up on her and form a contract with you while she's unconscious? Although Saber didn't directly reject him, Rin Anbin already understood what Saber meant. It was obvious that Saber wouldn't form a contract with Rin Anbin under such circumstances. That would be no different from betrayal. I knew you would say that. Rin Anbin wasn't upset at all. Instead, he smiled. But, Saber, we don't know when Sakura will wake up. If she continues to sleep like this, what are you going to do? If my master can't fight, then I, as the sword, will do, Saber replied without hesitation. Plus, I should be the one fighting. Sakura is someone I have to protect. It's fine even if I don't fight. But if you don't have a master, you'll be troubled too, right? Rin Anbin said. Do you want to fight alone until the end and obtain the Holy Grail yourself? Saber frowned when she heard this. Why did it sound like Saber was going to monopolize the Holy Grail? I know you're strong, but it's not good to fight alone. Rin Anbin finally made this suggestion. Coincidentally, I don't have a servant, and your master can't move. So, why don't we form a team? A team. Saber seemed to understand Rin Anbin's intention. I don't have any desire for the Holy Grail. I just want to obtain the final victory. Rin Anbin said firmly. So, even if we don't have a contract, we can just form a team. I'll be your master, and you'll be my servant. Before Sakura wakes up, how about we maintain this relationship? Relationship, not contract, right? Saber finally understood. In other words, we're master and servant in name, right? That's right. Rin Enosaka smiled. How about it? Is this acceptable? Saber closed her eyes and fell into deep thought. Rin Anbin didn't rush her. He just sat there and waited for Saber's answer. After a long time, Saber finally opened her eyes and nodded. I understand, Rin. Before Sakura wakes up, we'll form a team and fight together. Hearing this, Rin Enosaka smiled in satisfaction. Nighttime, after leaving Enbin's house, Noah went straight to the church. Enbin's house was quite far from the church. In addition, it was the middle of the night. Noah walked in the dark towards the church. He didn't seem to be in a hurry. It was as if he was out for a walk. It looked like he was taking a leisurely walk, but in reality, it was quite fast. As the night deepened, Noah climbed up a steep slope and finally arrived at the entrance of the church from a few days ago. Looking at the dark night, the church seemed to have opened its bloody mouth and was ready to swallow any intruders alive. This time, Noah didn't just stand at the entrance. Instead, he pushed open the iron fence and walked in. Outside the church's chapel was a courtyard that looked a little shabby. Noah crossed the courtyard and came to the chapel. He reached out his hand and pushed the door open. Gotcha! With a slight but clear sound of the door opening, the full view of the church appeared in front of Noah's eyes. It was just an ordinary church. Long benches were lined up in an orderly manner. Silver moonlight shone through the windows. Wisps of fog-like smoke rose from the candles placed on the table at the front of the hall. Wisps of cold air lingered in the air. In this church, the back of a tall man wearing a priest's outfit appeared in Noah's vision. Looking at the priest, Noah slowly narrowed his eyes. Chapter 770. In the middle of the night, the chapel did not have the slightest hint of holiness. Instead, it gave off a sinister vibe. In such a sinister chapel, at the very front, the priest holding a book did not seem to notice Noah's arrival at all. His head was still lowered, as if he was silently reciting the scriptures of the Bible. At least, he looked quite pious. However, in this sinister chapel, the scene of a tall priest silently reciting scriptures was very strange no matter how one looked at it. If it was a timid person who saw this scene, they would definitely subconsciously have the idea of turning around and leaving, right? Not only did Noah not turn around and leave, but he pushed open the door and walked into the chapel without any disguise. Every step he took caused a clear sound of footsteps. He was upright, without the slightest bit of sneakiness. This made the chapel seem a little livelier. However, Noah did not directly walk towards the priest. Instead, after walking for a short distance, he stopped and did not make any further movements. An indescribable silence filled the chapel. The believers and visitors did not immediately make a sound. They only maintained the scene in front of them, causing the atmosphere to become quite strange. Although this was the first time they had met, and there was no obvious hostility between them, the scene in front of them gave people the feeling that a confrontation had already been going on in the dark, with swords drawn and bows drawn, and was extremely tense. Whoever broke the silence first would be the one at a disadvantage. It was just this kind of atmosphere. After an unknown amount of time had passed, the first round of confrontation ended with the priests admitting defeat. The sacred chapel will never reject any visitors. A low and gloomy voice came from the priest's body. However, you don't seem to have any reason to visit at this time, do you? Rider's master. The moment the voice fell, the priest put down the Bible in his hand, turned around, and met Noah's gaze. The supervisor of the Holy Grail War, Yen Fengili. At this moment, the man called a fake priest by Rin Enben looked at Noah with a pair of unfriendly eyes. It was as if he was looking at something unimportant. A smile appeared on his face, as if he had seen through everything. Most of the masters who come here are either here for help or for protection. Rider's master, what is your purpose for coming here? To the point. There was not the slightest hint of beating around the bush. The priest named Yen Fengili went straight to the point. He did not seem like a clergyman at all, which made people feel a sense of disgust. At this moment, Noah did not want to be outdone. He pursed his lips and smiled, and spoke without reservation. I have something to confirm, so I came here. Is that so? Yen Fengili put his hands behind his back and closed his eyes. Instead of calling him a priest, it would be better to call him an important member of the battle. It is my duty as a supervisor to help Master resolve his doubts regarding the Holy Grail War. I can't refuse your request. He made it sound as if he could not refuse because of his job, and not because he wanted to help Noah resolve his doubts. Yen Fengili said. Then, what do you want to confirm? What I want to confirm is very simple. Noah stared at Yen Fengili and shrugged. Excuse me, father, as long as one has the aptitude for magic, anyone can become a master, right? There is a misunderstanding in your question, Yen Fengili said calmly. It should be said that as long as one has the aptitude for magic, anyone can be chosen by the Holy Grail and become a master. Indeed. Noah nodded slowly. Then, does that include supervisors who know how to use magic? Yen Fengili opened his eyes and looked at Noah's half-smile. He actually smiled as well. Unfortunately, no matter which Holy Grail war it was, there was no precedent of a supervisor being chosen by the Holy Grail, including this one. There is also a misunderstanding in your answer. Noah's eyes flashed. Not being chosen is one thing, and not being able to become a master is another. Depriving a master of his command incantation and robbing the master of his identity and rights, there should be many precedents in the Holy Grail wars of the past, right? The whole place suddenly fell silent. The smile on Yen Fengili's face disappeared little by little. His resolute face was expressionless as he looked straight at Noah. What are you trying to say? I don't think you are an idiot, father. Noah crossed his arms, and there was some pressure in his eyes. As one of the masters of the previous Holy Grail War, and the supervisor of this Holy Grail War, I don't think you are so ignorant of the rules of the Holy Grail War. In short, what you want to say is, did I steal the command incantation from another master and intervene in this Holy Grail War and break the rules? Yen Fengili said calmly. Since you said so, it means that you have evidence to prove the truth of this matter, right? How could that be? Noah spread his hands helplessly. If I had solid evidence, then I wouldn't have come here alone to confirm it. I would have prepared for Saber and Ryder to attack this place together. Then, I would have let Rindosaka see what kind of person her supervisor is. Oh. Yen Fengili suddenly smiled. In other words, you came here to question me without any preparation. That's right, Noah admitted generously and even kindly gave a suggestion. So, if there is a supervisor who wants to break the rules and intervene in the Holy Grail War, and wants to take me down, now is the best time to do so. You don't have to provoke me, Master of Ryder, Yen Fengili said expressionlessly as if he was facing a child who liked to play pranks. No matter what, I have no intention of killing you here. If this is your purpose, then please leave. After he finished speaking, Yen Fengili turned around and was about to pick up the Bible that he put on the table. However, his body suddenly froze, and he suddenly turned around. Whoosh! At the same time, a fist carrying the whistling sound of the wind suddenly came from behind Yen Fengili and directly landed in the air. Yen Fengili turned his body and dodged the punch. He clicked his tongue and looked at Noah, who had appeared in front of him at some point and was still in a punching posture. You actually attacked the supervisor. Are you not normal? Master of Ryder. You're wrong. It's because I'm too normal that I'm so easily affected by my emotions. Noah retracted his fist and turned around to look at Yen Fengili with a cold smile. You're right. I don't have any evidence to prove that you've broken the rules, and I'm not even sure that you're Master of Lancer. However, unfortunately, I don't have a good impression of priests. The priests that I've met in the past were either man-killer ghosts or crazy people. For someone like you who doesn't look like a priest at all and is full of evil energy, I think that using this method would be the easiest way to confirm what I want to confirm. After he finished speaking, Noah seemed to be mocking himself for letting his emotions affect his decisions, and a manic aura surged from his entire body. Within that aura, there was a trace of murderous intent. If you don't want to die, then struggle as much as you can. However, Noah's direct attack was like peeling off a corner of the mask that no one could see on Yen Fengili's face. A sinister smile appeared on Yen Fengili's resolute face. I see. As expected of the master who can go head-to-head with a servant. You're full of confidence in your own conjectures. Then, there's no need to beat around the bush. You have the demeanor of a magician, Noah Doria. Have you gathered sufficient information about me? Noah extended a palm in Yen Fengili's direction. In that case, let me see what you're capable of. The moment he finished speaking, a beautiful magical formation appeared in front of Noah's palm. Light illuminated the church. Chapter 771. In the dark night, inside the church that was rippling with an ominous aura, a strong light suddenly shone through the window and the crack of the door. It was as if something had soared up, illuminating the entire church. Boom! Immediately afterward, accompanied by a heavy explosion, with the church's door as the center, the wall in front of the building burst open, and a huge beam of light shot out from the inside, directly passing through the courtyard in front of the church. After blasting the iron fence, it rubbed against the ground and shot into the distance. Under the attack of this huge beam of light, a figure seemed to be abruptly pushed out, flew upside down, and fell heavily on the ground. After making a muffled groan, he turned over and kneeled on one knee, awkwardly rubbing against the ground for some distance before stopping. Chi! A trace of light smoke rose from his body, making Yen Feng Chi kneeling on one knee on the ground. The priest's attire on his body looked like it was on fire, and there were traces of scorch everywhere. However, Yen Feng Chi didn't care about his own embarrassment. His eyes were fixed on the front. Duh. Under the gaze of Yen Feng Chi, the wall in front of him was directly destroyed without leaving a trace, and inside the church, a figure slowly walked out with clear footsteps. Around Noah's body, as if there were cannons floating around him, a precise geometric pattern moved along with Noah's movement. Surrounding Noah's body, there was a burst of amazing magic power, making the whole space filled with an oppressive atmosphere. Looking at Yen Feng Chi, who was kneeling on one knee on the ground and staring at him, Noah raised his eyebrows. "You're really worthy of being able to stand firmly in both the magic association and the holy church at the same time. That attack just now almost forced Castor to leave the stage. Even after taking that attack, you didn't suffer any obvious damage. You're quite capable." After saying such a sentence, Noah raised his hand again, as if he was giving orders. He waved his hand gently. An intricate geometrical pattern in the space around Noah suddenly trembled, and the astonishing magic power that lingered within suddenly converged. Yen Feng Chi, who had already seen Noah's magic cannon once, suddenly jumped up and rolled to the side without caring about his image. The next moment, a beam of light made of magic power burst out from the magic array, crossing the space, carrying a dazzling light and a strong impact, and fell on the position where Yen Feng Chi was a second ago. Bang! An amazing big explosion was stirred up from the courtyard in front of the church, bringing terrible wind and fire in all directions. Although Yen Feng Chi escaped the direct attack, he was still affected by the wind and fire. His whole body was like it was hit by something heavy. He once again hit the ground, and rolled uncontrollably. However, this time, Yen Feng Chi did not choose to adjust his posture. Instead, he simply took advantage of the wind and rolled on the ground. He stomped on the ground with one foot, making his whole body spin like a top. With a turn, he rushed to Noah's side. Ha! With a loud shout, Yen Feng Chi clenched his hands into fists. His fists were like iron hammers, following his spinning body in an arc, and punched directly in Noah's direction. However, almost at the same time, Noah raised a fist with a cold smile and pulled it behind him. In the vibration of the air, his whole fist was covered by a golden vortex of air, bringing with it an ear-piercing whistling sound as it met Yen Feng Chi's fist. Bang! With a heavy muffled sound, the strength chi caused by the collision of the two fists spread out like ripples. Noah's body trembled slightly. Then, he dispelled the force of Yen Feng's punch that was aimed at him. However, Yen Feng Chi was sent flying by the terrifying impact of Noah's annihilation strike. Amidst the chaotic sounds of footsteps, he finally managed to stabilize himself with great difficulty. After a brief exchange of blows, Noah was clear about the situation. Regardless of Yen Feng Chi's ability in magic, in close combat, his fist technique was probably not inferior to Gumu Zangikiro's. The difference was that Gumu Zangikiro's fist technique was born for surprise attacks, and was too strange and unpredictable. Yen Feng Qi Li's fist technique was rather orthodox, and did not have any obvious weaknesses. Unfortunately, if that's the case, then he can only struggle. As soon as he finished speaking, the magic formations around Noah lit up one after another, gathering a strong magical power. Seeing this, Yen Feng Qi Li's body tensed up, and his expression was grave. Only those who had actually faced Noah knew how difficult it was to deal with Noah, who had turned into a mobile cannon. When dealing with the servants, because most of the servants basically had magical skills, Noah's magic cannon didn't play any role at all, it could only be reduced to a decoration. When he first faced Castor, Noah's magic cannon almost sent the opponent back to the seat of heroes. It was enough to show how powerful this magic was because of Noah. Otherwise, later, Castor wouldn't specifically guard against Noah's magic. Now, the opponent was not a servant with magical skills or a magician from the gods' generation. Noah's magic cannon finally showed its true power. The moment the familiar trembling sound sounded, a magical beam with a strong light and a terrible impact swept out and blasted in the direction of Yen Feng Qi Li. Bang! There was another huge explosion. The magic beam that landed on the ground stirred up a gust of wind that shook the surroundings. Once again, Yen Feng and Qi Li, who had leaped out of the way at the last moment, were blown away. They rolled on the ground for the umpteenth time. Yen Feng Qi Li, who was still rolling on the ground, didn't have time to get up. The trembling sound that made people's hearts shrink fiercely finally made Yen Feng Qi Li's pupils finally shrank to the size of a needle tip. If this continues, Yen Feng Qi Li will only be forced to a dead end by the continuous bombardment of the magic cannon. Yen Feng Qi Li, who understood his situation, could only click his tongue. He put his hand into his arms and pulled out several red tools that looked like daggers. Between his 5 fingers, he tightened his grip, and from the tip of the handle, a sharp blade popped out. Immediately, Yen Feng Qi Li fiercely rolled, his figure jumped up, and with a swing of his hand, the weapons in his hand were like arrows, cutting through the air, and directly shot in the direction of Noah. Seeing this, Noah was slightly surprised, but he didn't have the slightest hesitation. His body tensed up, and a dense magical energy immediately emerged from his body. In the end, it lingered around Noah's body, causing waves of magical aura to shake off from Noah's body. The numerous sharp weapons that turned into arrows quickly flashed over, and viciously shot towards Noah's throat, heart, limbs, abdomen, and head, respectively. The attack of every weapon was aimed at the goal of killing. However, when the weapons with the cold white tips on their blades violently shot over, and landed on the magical aura that lingered around Noah's body, it seemed to have encountered a major obstacle. Even if they penetrated the magical aura, the speed of the shooting became slower and slower. In just a short while, the sharp weapons that were shot out seemed to have lost their strength in a swamp. Before they could even touch Noah's body, they slowed down one after another, and fell to the ground with crisp sounds. Without giving Yen Feng Qi Li any chance to react, a magical array around Noah rotated, and a burst of dazzling magical light burst out, causing the magical light to turn into a beam of light. Following a straight trajectory, it violently landed in the direction of Yen Feng Qi Li amidst the vibrations in the air. The violent impact and flames were set off. This time, Yen Feng Qi Li was hit directly because he dodged too hastily. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body flew out. After rubbing against the ground for more than 10 meters, he slowly came to a stop. Is this the end? Amidst Noah's sarcastic voice, the fatal magical light beam fell. The sound of the explosion resounded throughout the night sky of the church. Chapter 772. Boom! When the gigantic magic light beams suddenly landed in the courtyard in front of the church, setting off stormy waves of impact and dense flames that soared into the sky, completely covering Yen Feng and Chili's bodies, Noah's expression did not show the slightest bit of happiness. Instead, it darkened slightly. TSK, 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 TSK. After being bombarded by Noah's magic cannon several times, there was basically no place in the courtyard in front of the church that was unscathed. There were either deep holes in the ground, or the stone bricks on the surface had been blown off, leaving only a layer of black soil. It was as though the ground had been charred by a fire, and traces of smoke were everywhere. In such a messy place, the shock waves and intense flames that had just been stirred up began to slowly dissipate. Not long after, a figure appeared in the center of the flames. However, it was not Yen Feng Chili's figure. At this moment, Yen Feng Chili was still lying on the ground with blood at the corner of his mouth. He had been protected by the person who had suddenly appeared and escaped the disaster. Noah had more or less expected this outcome. Regardless of whether it was the conclusion made by his own speculation or the fact that a figure had suddenly barged into the area covered by Noah's sensing ability after the magic cannon fired and protected Yen Feng and Chili, the result was obvious. Hence, Noah laughed coldly. "You're finally willing to appear." Lancer's servant. The newcomer was none other than Lancer. Holding the familiar crimson magic spear, Lancer first glanced at Yen Feng Chili, who was lying on the ground behind him, clutching his chest and continuously coughing out blood. Then, he turned his gaze back to Noah with a helpless expression on his face. He still attacked. This sentence indicated that Lancer had actually been observing the situation from the side. However, Lancer did not seem to have any intention of interfering in the beginning. He did not even enter the area covered by Noah's sensing ability, so Noah did not discover him. Now, Lancer's appearance had confirmed Noah's speculation. There was no doubt that Yen Feng Chili was Lancer's master. In other words, as the supervisor of the Holy Grail War, Yen Feng Chili really interfered in the Holy Grail War and made an example of violating the rules like Castor. Yen Feng Chili clutched his chest and struggled to get up. He didn't look at Lancer in front of him and stared straight at Noah, who was opposite him. His face was a little pale because of his serious injury. "I didn't expect that you were really going to kill me. Didn't you think about what would happen to you if I didn't violate the rules? What? Will someone avenge you? Or will the Holy Grail give me a punishment? Don't tell me you're trying to say that you've offended the Magic Association and the Holy Church." Noah said sarcastically. "I'm sorry, but no matter what the consequences are, I'm not afraid of anything." "Oh." Yen Feng Chili tried to straighten his back and also sneered. "Originally, because you didn't have any hostility to the rest of the masters, and you even saved Tong Ying and didn't do anything to Ling who lost his servant, I thought you were just a naive boy. I didn't expect that even if there was the possibility of being wronged by you, you would not hesitate to kill me. I admit that my evaluation of you is too one-sided. No, your evaluation is basically correct. I don't have any desire for the Holy Grail, and I don't participate in this ceremony with some kind of mission like Yuansaka. So, I'll turn a blind eye to the other masters if I find them pleasing to the eye. If I don't find them pleasing to the eye, I'll teach them a lesson or even kill them. I won't be hostile to the other masters just because of this ceremony," Noah said with a smile that wasn't a smile. "You are the same." Hearing this, Yen Feng Chili narrowed his eyes. "In other words, what caused you to be hostile towards me?" "Well, it's okay if you interpret it that way." Noah pursed his lips. "Who asked you to have the exact same feeling as the two murderers and psychopathic priests I met?" In fact, the moment he entered the church and saw Yen Feng Chili, Noah's impression of Yen Feng Chili dropped to the lowest. There was no other reason than the feeling Yen Feng Chili gave Noah was too similar to one Bing Yongli and Freed that he met before. Although it was just a feeling, the more Noah talked with Yen Fengqi and Qi Li, the more he felt that Yen Fengqi and Qi Li were the same as when Bing Yongli and Freed. They were a group of people with completely flawed values. They were definitely not good people. That was why Noah chose to make a move in such a domineering manner. Reality proved that Noah's feeling was right. Yen Fengqi Li was indeed not a good person. How do you feel? Yen Fengqi Li closed his eyes and said such a sentence. I thought that if this continues, when I reveal my true identity, it should be at the end of the Holy Grail War. But now, I've been exposed ahead of time. I thought that when I reveal my identity, it must be in front of Ling. That way, Ling's expression will be very interesting. Hearing Yen Fengqi Li's words, Noah also had a deep question in his heart. He remembered that when he first fought with Castor, Castor said that because Lancer's master wanted a little girl, he sent Lancer to cooperate with Castor. So far, there was only one person who would be called a little girl by Castor. At that moment, Noah asked, "Are you thinking about Nagasaka?" Idea? Yen Fengqi Li smiled, and his smile was unusually happy. If it's because I want to see what kind of interesting reaction Ling will have when he learns the truth, then I am indeed thinking about it. Yen Fengqi Li's smile directly made Noah's mood become very bad. The truth. It doesn't matter if I tell you. Yen Fengqi Li's mouth evoked an unpleasant arc. I just want to know what kind of expression Ling will have when she learns that her father died in my hands. Hearing this sentence, Noah was shocked. You killed Nagasaka's father. I can't help it, he is my teacher. Yen Fengqi Li laughed more and more unscrupulously. As a disciple who needs to follow behind the mentor, that man's back has been exposed to me too many times. I can't help but want to go forward and stab him with a knife. As a result, I couldn't help but become like this. In the last Holy Grail War, Ling Nagasaka's father, as the head of the Nagasaka family, attended the ceremony as one of the masters, but he died very suddenly. Noah also knew about this matter. So that's how it is. Noah looked at Yen Fengqi Li's eyes became cold. Was it because you plotted against him that Nagasaka's father died so suddenly? What? You don't have any reason to be angry, do you? Or rather, you should be happy. Yen Fengqi Li opened his hands, as if he was going to promote some theory, and spat out a calm and slightly deranged voice. After all, it was that man who sent one of his daughters into Jiantong's family and almost fed her to the worms. Don't you love that child of the Jiantong family very much? You should be satisfied with this result, right? What a disgusting guy. As expected, no priest is a good person. I can completely confirm this matter. Looking at the joyful smile on Yen Fengqi Li's face, Noah's expression gradually calmed down. Forget it. Since my question has been answered, you should obediently leave the stage. With that, Noah lifted his feet and slowly walked in the direction of Yen Fengqi Li. Seeing this, Yen Fengqi Li did not say a word. He immediately turned around, clutched his chest, and ran out of the church. Noah watched as Yen Feng and Qi Li left. Just as he was about to chase after them, a careless voice rang in his ears, causing him to stop in his tracks. Hey, don't chase after him. How about you play with me here? Chapter 773. Hey, don't chase after him. How about you stay here and play with me? Noah stopped in his tracks and looked at Yen Fengqi Li, who was gradually running away. He clicked his tongue and looked at Lancer with a sharp gaze. What are you doing? Lancer asked in a relaxed and carefree voice. What are you doing? Ha! Lancer, who had endured Noah's sharp gaze, did not retreat at all. Instead, he spoke excitedly. Not bad. There are people in this era with such eyes. It really makes one's blood boil. Seeing Lancer's eyes and expression filled with a strong desire to fight, Noah roughly understood what kind of person Lancer was. Battle maniac. I hate this kind of person the most. Noah looked straight at Lancer and declared. Are you going to stop me no matter what? Lancer. I'm sorry, kid. Lancer held the magic spear in his hand tightly and shrugged helplessly. Even if he's that kind of person, he's still my master. Without him, I can't continue to exist. So, it's better if you stay here and accompany me. Is that so? Noah closed his eyes slightly and then suddenly opened them. Then let me prepare a worthy opponent for you. After saying this, Noah raised one hand and turned the back of his hand towards Lancer. Lancer was shocked. Don't tell me, you're planning to. Without giving Lancer a chance to react, Noah raised his hand high above his head and chanted loudly. Come here. Rider. This sentence directly turned into the purest of orders and resounded under the night sky of the church. Clang. On the back of Noah's hand, the sword-shaped command incantation, surrounded by two snakes, suddenly lit up and brought with it a rich red light. In the blink of an eye, one of the snakes on the command incantation suddenly faded away and gradually became blurry. The command incantation, which had become indistinct, directly turned into a huge amount of magic power. It rippled and reverberated to the surroundings, causing the space around Noah to suddenly become illusory. Then, a dazzling light burst out from the illusory space. A tall and slender figure appeared in the middle of it. Ryder, who was holding a spike-like chain dagger, raised his head that was wearing an eye patch. With his back facing Noah, he looked at Lancer opposite him and a strong magic wave was emitted from his body. Ryder's servant, here following the summons. As if he didn't see Lancer, Ryder turned around and looked at Noah. Master, please give me your orders. Orders. Noah smiled faintly. No orders, Ryder. This time, do as you like it. Make as much trouble as you want. Hearing this, Ryder tightened his grip on the chain dagger and a bright smile that was usually expressionless. Understood, Master. Noah crouched down like a cheetah and chased after Yen Feng and Chile as soon as he received Ryder's reply. Stop right there. Kid. Lancer naturally couldn't just watch as Noah chased after Yen Fengili. He turned around, but before he could make a move, a strong gust of wind came from behind him. His expression changed slightly and he quickly turned his body sideways. Swoosh. In the sharp sound of the wind breaking, the spike-like dagger connected to the chain brushed past Lancer's body. Like an arrow that pierced through space, it shot out and landed in the air. However, at the same time, an aura suddenly approached Lancer and flashed behind him. Clang! The crisp sound of the collision and the bursting of sparks shook the air. That was the sound caused by the fierce collision between the red magic spear and the chain dagger. The body of the magic spear and the spike-like dagger constantly rubbed against each other, creating strong sparks. Under such circumstances, Ryder raised his head. Although his eyes were covered by a shield, when Lancer met his gaze that shouldn't have existed, he suddenly felt a chill in his heart. Then, Ryder smiled. His smile was like a rose with thorns, full of danger. Let's fight, Lancer. Hearing this, Lancer also smiled. His smile was rather ferocious. All right, I've been waiting for this day for a long time. Violent magic power rose from the two servants, and the tension in the air was instantly ignited. Clang! Then, the loud sound of metal clashing reverberated in the air and didn't die down for a long time. Swoosh! On the other side, Noah, who had Ryder in charge of delaying Lancer, turned into a shadow and flashed under the moonlight. Like a ghost, he rushed into a forest at his fastest speed. Within the range of Noah's sensing ability, he could still sense Yen Fengili's aura. Perhaps because he was injured, Yen Fengili couldn't escape from the range of Noah's sensing ability in time. This was also the most unlucky thing about Yen Fengili. It was destined that tonight would be the most unforgettable and unbearable night for him. Following the remnant aura within the range of his sensing ability, Noah constantly shuttled through the lush forest. His body was extremely nimble as he leaped over the trees. At a speed that could only be seen as a shadow, he sprinted in a certain direction. Swoosh! Just as Noah was about to catch up with the aura in front of him, a weapon that was as sharp as a dagger or a short sword suddenly shot out from the front. It cut through the air, and with a sharp sound, it accurately pierced towards Noah's body. It was a weapon that Yen Fengili had used once in his battle with Noah. It could eject a blade from the dagger-like hilt. It was said that under normal circumstances, only members of the Church of Holy Light would use this weapon. It was a weapon called the Black Key. In terms of swords, this weapon wasn't refined enough, and its sharpness couldn't be compared to ordinary swords. However, in terms of length, it was a weapon that was very suitable for throwing. Moreover, this weapon had a miraculous effect on spiritual bodies. The blade of the sword was weaved with magic. As long as there was a hilt, it could be carried on one's body at any time. When it was time to use it, it could be taken out. The blade of the sword weaved with magic could be used in battle. It was a very convenient and miraculous weapon. If this weapon was used against a servant, as long as it could hit, it would be able to cause damage. It was a pity that Noah wasn't a spiritual body. To Noah, Yen Fengili's Black Key was no different from ordinary daggers and short swords. Pang! Immediately, a violent and dense magic burst out from Noah's body. It was like a shock wave that blew in all directions. Dang 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 dang. The black keys that were shooting towards Noah were directly blown away by the magic storm that burst out from Noah's body. It was as if they had landed on a steel shield, and they were all knocked away. From this, it could be seen that in terms of power, these black keys were indeed somewhat lacking. The appearance of these black keys was equivalent to telling Noah. Yen Fengili was right in front of him. Along with the dense magic wave, Noah's eyes flashed with a hint of sharpness. He turned around and stomped on the trunk of a tree. His entire body turned into an arrow and shot out rapidly, flashing forward. Not long after, in the field of vision in front, a figure wearing a priest's outfit, covering his chest and fleeing in a sorry state was imprinted in Noah's eyes. As if he had sensed the movement behind him, Yen Fengili turned around with all his might. However, there was not a single figure behind Yen Fengili. This result not only did not make Yen Fengili feel relieved at all. Instead, he was shocked. He turned around abruptly and looked in the direction that he was fleeing in. There, a figure quietly landed on the ground. Yen Fengili's face darkened. Yen Fengili's intuition told him that it was him. There was really no way for him to escape today. Escape? Noah revealed a cold smile. Do you think you can escape? Fake priest. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.